So the question is, are Mormons atheists?
Mormons actually have a very good knowledge of Scripture and the ability to cite chapter and verse. But what they don't have is philosophy. If somebody believes that you should worship Adam, that person is an idolater.
Do Mormons today agree with you that Brigham Young, in this sense, taught idolatry?
It's just not true that it's just alleged to have been taught.
Yeah.
And it's not true that it was just a theory. It is a false doctrine.
How many gods would Brigham Young say there were? And then how many gods would Jacob Hansen say there are?
Jacob was asked almost this direct question. The question he was asked was whether God the Father had a God that he worshipped.
What did he say?
There's two things. One, how many gods are there? Two, what do we mean by gods? Steel manning it, they're going to say he's a creator in the same way that any artist is a creator. When you create content, when you build a statue, we can call Michelangelo a creator in a certain sense, but he doesn't create the marble. He just turns a marble into something beautiful.
The God that we are bound to worship, is it fair to say he was once a man like we are now? According to LDS today?
Yes, overwhelmingly.
My next question, was he once a sinner?
That is a good question.
Joe Heschmeyer, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
This is a bit bloody different, isn't it?
It is similar in some ways, but very different in others.
Yeah.
It's pretty exciting.
It looks
Getting
good.
to walk through behind the scenes and seeing all the people that are helping you now, whereas before it was kind of a two-man show.
Yeah, it's a bit different. And I also just love that we've got 6 vessels of liquid
Yes,
on our
exactly.
table.
We've got fuel for the journey.
But I'm so glad to have you on the show. You have had a lot going on lately. You've been debating Mormons and running away from Orthodox. Here's how we'll start, all right? And then if you don't like this, you can just pretend you heard a different question and answer however you wish.
I've watched politics before.
All right, well, here's the question. Why are Mormons atheists?
So it's a very loaded question, and I think it's the kind of thing that is likely to hurt someone's feelings. So I want to be clear. Let me give a preamble to the answer, if you don't mind. Dealing with members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, LDS, Mormons, although sometimes we use Mormon to refer to non-LDS followers of Joseph Smith as well, they often come in with a certain experience of having been misunderstood, misrepresented, mischaracterized. And so there can be a little bit of frankly, pretty understandable protection, maybe knee-jerk defensiveness, and it's very easy to come off as needlessly combative. So we have to sort of thread the needle where we approach people charitably and we speak the truth in love, but we also take care to recognize it's very easy to get things wrong when you're trying to describe a belief system that isn't your own. Like every Catholic knows this. Like every Catholic has had the experience of being told, here's why it's wrong, you guys worship Mary. And you just say, like, we don't though. Or you have someone quoting some really crazy liberal Catholic and saying, well, look, here's a Catholic priest who even says this. And you're like, well, that person carries no weight in my view of the world. Just because, somebody with an SJ after their name in the mid-20th century says a certain crazy thing, that doesn't automatically make it true. It doesn't automatically make it a representative view of the Catholic Church. So I say all that at the outset to say, I'm going to do my best to fairly and charitably present the Mormon position. Again, I'm using Mormon as a shorthand here, not in a pejorative way, but also provide some actual critiques of it. So I would just beg forgiveness in the beginning if I get anything where you say that's not quite how we would articulate it, or that's just one view among many. I've done my best to make sure I'm representing the actual position. The other thing that makes this trickier with Mormonism compared to something like Catholicism is there's not a catechism.
Yeah.
So you can say, here are some official Mormon sources. You can even say, here are things that your presidents in the past have said, and they're regarded as prophets.
Right.
And we expect, as non-Mormons, that that's going to carry the same weight as if you said, Isaiah says such and such. So, okay, it doesn't matter that Isaiah is not alive anymore. He's inspired by God. He's got revelation. So obviously we carry that with the weight that we would carry it if we were alive in Jesus's day and hearing, St. Peter talk, or, those things. Whether they're alive or dead, it doesn't matter. But because of their vision of ongoing revelation, when you cite to even like past presidents, even though they were regarded as prophets, they don't seem to carry the same weight as the living
I don't think they believe in infallibility at all for anyone.
No, Jacob Hansen in our debate explicitly denied that. So I think these are important things to just know at the outset. there is a line that Flannery O'Connor says in a letter, I believe it was to Dr. Spivey in the mid-50s, where she says, "You can know what I believe because I'm a Catholic, but I can't know what you believe as a Protestant unless I ask you."
Mm,
And Mormonism is somewhere in the middle between those two,
okay.
where there's a lot of, I mean, you have an authority. So you can point to things where you say, look, your church teaches XYZ in a way you can't for something like there's no Protestant church of an equivalent structure at all. But on the other hand, there's very few things that are going to fall in that all LDS are required to believe whatever. And so it's much more that this is a common Mormon view. You might find some outliers. I give all of that to say, even on big issues like the theology of God, you can find some very strange differences within Mormon thought. Strange from the outside, things where you would expect them to be much more harmonious than they are.
Quick clarifying question. Do they believe in biblical inerrancy?
No. So Joseph Smith articulated that the Bible was, divinely inspired as it was originally written,
Yeah.
but that leaves open the idea, as you get in Islam as well, that, oh, well, maybe the manuscripts were
So it would
corrupted.
seem to me that if you're dealing with a religion who doesn't believe that their scriptures are inerrant or their prophets are infallible, that there's probably going to end up being a lot of flex in the joints.
Yes, that's a great way of describing it. And a lot of just, well, that's not what we talk about right now.
Yeah.
So you can find things that were very clearly taught with what seems to be the highest level of authority, and we'll return to that in a minute.
Okay.
Where now it's just they've moved on and they reject it as not even being true. The most famous example of this, and we can get into kind of the nuances of the level of authority at which it was taught and everything, is what's called the Adam God doctrine. And in the Adam God doctrine, Brigham Young, the immediate successor after Joseph Smith, declared that the only God we're to have anything to do with is Adam, that Adam is our God. He has his own God, but there is this sort of Godhead of three persons, not three persons in one being, but three separate gods united in purpose. This is sometimes called social Trinitarianism. It's just polytheism, but they're united in purpose. So Adam has his own God, Elohim, Yahweh, and Yahweh has his own God, Elohim. And so it's very clearly like Yahweh is the Father and his son is Adam. Or yeah, it's complicated. And this, I want to stress, is not what Mormons today believe. And in fact, later LDS presidents have described this as a damnable sort of doctrine.
I'm a big fan of coffee. We've tried a lot of coffee over the years, but our sponsor, 7 Weeks Coffee, is the one my wife and I landed on, and now it is constantly stocked and brewed in our house. It's not just great coffee, it's a brand built around values we take seriously. 7 Weeks Coffee is America's pro-life coffee company on a mission to fund the pro-life movement one cup of coffee at a time. Now, why are they called 7 Weeks Coffee? Because at 7 weeks, a baby is the size of a coffee bean, and at the same time, a heartbeat is clearly detected on an ultrasound. They've built their business around saving lives by donating 10% of every sale to pregnancy centers and pro-life organizations nationwide. They've now raised over $1.5 million and saved thousands of lives. Now, let's talk about the coffee, because I care about what I'm fueling my body with. It's mold-free, pesticide-free, shade-grown, and low-acid, and it's organically farmed. It truly checks all the boxes. When I first heard about 7 Weeks Coffee, I was thrilled they had a great mission, but I thought to myself, that's fine, but the coffee needs to be fantastic for me to really get interested, and it is. It absolutely is. We've got about 5 bags right now above my espresso machine. It's terrific coffee. I highly recommend it. So go to 7weekscoffee.com and save 15% forever when you subscribe. Plus, get a free gift with your order. And exclusively for my listeners, use code PINTS for an extra 10% off your first order. That's a 25% total savings on your first order plus a free gift. Just use code PINTS at checkout. And how do they talk about it as a damnable doctrine when their second prophet said this?
They'll just say, well, we don't know for sure what he meant by it. We don't know for sure that it was said at the highest level of authority. And what makes this complicated is several things. First, he taught this in the tabernacle. Now, that is the closest you're going to get is like ex cathedra.
Yeah.
So in the 1850s, there's a work called Journal of Discourses. Journal of Discourses was originally published quasi-officially. Um, loves the like anyway, it published quasi-officially, and it records the things that the prophets are saying in these various contexts. And Brigham Young gives a sermon in which he says all of us can fall into mistakes and errors, and this is true even of the prophets. However, the things said in the tabernacle are different. They're protected from error. Like he makes this very explicit.
Yeah.
Actually, I think I have his actual words. If we want to,
While you're
quote
doing
him
that, what I'm
directly, yeah.
thinking of is if the scriptures aren't inerrant and the prophets aren't infallible, and they can sort of change what they say about God. So one of the things they've changed is that we're not worshiping Adam, it sounds like, okay? Then if Mormon doctrine is mutable, should we hope that it just morphs into Catholicism?
So you have a sort of similar thing with what was previously called the RLDS, where they sort of accept something like the Trinity now, and they've moved in a much more.
Who are these people?
This is so after Joseph Smith dies.
Yeah.
He leaves 3 different sets of criteria for who his successors are going to be, and they don't match up. Like he gives contradictory instructions over the course of his life. And so there is this succession crisis. If you're familiar with the history of Islam and the Sunni Shia split, very similar. This is called the succession crisis of 1844. And so his own wife does not believe the LDS is the appropriate church. She rejects Brigham Young. There's a lot of controversy. There's a lot of scandal. Joseph Smith has a brother who dies mysteriously, and there's accusations of poison. And I mean, it's a crazy situation. And Brigham Young is the one who is appointed with one of the mechanisms. And then again, think about the Sunni Shia thing. Do you go with the blood relative? Do you go with the person who's kind of popularly supported? And you've got the quorum of the 12. And so you have this interesting question of how is a successor determined? And this was, to put it mildly, an unsettled question in 1844. And there were controversies about, do we wait for everyone to come back so that we can do this? Do we need to act quickly? There's all kinds of questions about the validity of the election. And I'm an outsider to it. I've got no dog in the hunt, except to say that the result of this is you have a bunch of different schisms. You have a bunch of different denominations of Mormons. The LDS are one of them, and they're by far the largest.
How many are there today, roughly? Like 3, 10?
No, the number I saw at one point was that there were 60 different denominations, but a lot of these are very, very small
similar.
groups. So a lot of these
similar in doctrine, or just small?
Similar in doctrine depends on when they break off, because some break off in 1844.
So you began by saying a group that broke off shortly after Brigham Young.
Yeah, so
now
one of the groups that break off in the
like
1844, and even break off is maybe not the right term, because the question is just who do we think is a valid follower of Joseph Smith? And they weren't part of the LDS and then broke off. They just never accepted Brigham Young as a successor.
Do you see LDS going against each other online as far as like presenting an apologetic for their branch of LDS in the way that Protestants might attack Protestants, you know?
Well, no. So this is where it gets a lot more confusing. I have not seen, I'm sure this exists, I just haven't seen it, like LDS versus RLDS or like Beckerites or any of these. I think these groups are largely too small, and I'm sure that you could find those fights. If the algorithm has not led me into those recesses of the internet.
There's still time.
And actually, so I come from Jackson County, Missouri, which allegedly is where the Garden of Eden was. And yeah, we can't even keep a stadium these days, but we used to have the Garden of Eden. And
how far we've fallen.
Yeah, exactly. This is post-fall. That's all you need to see. And it's allegedly where Jesus is going to return. And so Joseph Smith had a bunch of prophecies about how they were going to build a temple there in his lifetime, and they didn't. He later claimed this is because of the wickedness of men. But, he made very explicit promises that did not come true.
This reminds me of conspiracy theorists online who are saying things that don't seem to pan out, and then they jump onto a different conspiracy theory, hoping that everyone forgot about the last thing they just conspiratized
just watch the next episode. I've got the receipts. I'm going to drop, is there anyone in particular you're thinking of? I can think of some names.
What are you talking about, Joe?
So, yeah, there is this certain, and look, let's steelman the LDS argument here. They're going to say Jonah goes into Nineveh and says that in 40 days Nineveh will be destroyed, and lo and behold, it's not destroyed. There's an implicit conditionality to some of the promises of God. So I do think there's a way out in a certain sense, but I think that Mormons should also be mindful of the fact that the normal way we test whether a prophet is a true or false prophet is if they're making predictions about the future that then don't come true. We're told pretty explicitly in the Old Testament that is a sign that this is not a person who is authorized to speak on behalf of God. So understanding where that line is, I would think would come down to this. When Jonah is saying 40 days hence and Nineveh will be destroyed, it's like when you tell your kids, I'm going to count to 3 and you're going to go to your room or whatever. It's implicit in what you're saying. A normal person would hear that and understand this is going to happen or else.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't have to include the or else. You have to change your behavior because that's the whole point of the message. I don't think you could reasonably take that away from Joseph Smith's prophecies about the temple being built in Jackson County, but neither here nor there. The original reason I brought it up was to say that the RLDS, and I believe they're called Community of Christ or something similar now, they've tried to make themselves look like just another Protestant denomination that happens to have the Book of Mormon.
Do they accept the Trinity?
They say they do. So it's a...
Can we trust them?
That's a great question. I talked to a guy who was baptized.
Because if they accept the Trinity and are baptized, then they would be Christians.
If they have a Trinitarian intent with the baptism. Yeah. But the problem is not everyone who says in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit means the same thing.
Of course. That's why I asked if they believe in the Trinity.
And so I'm a little unqualified to answer that with any... They say they do. So I think, and that's a relatively recent kind of transformation. So when you were talking, could this ongoing series of changes lead to them becoming Catholic? They could at least get closer.
Yeah.
And in some ways have. Like they no longer believe that being black is a curse from God, which was originally taught and then was reversed in 1978 with Official Declaration 2. So there are a lot of ways in which we are certainly closer now. Official Declaration 1, forbidding plural marriage, aka polygamy. Official Declaration 2, undoing the sort of curse that keeps black people from becoming members of the LDS priesthood. Those reversals, they're just 180-degree reversals. There's no...
How do they talk about it? How do they...
Further revelation.
Further revelation.
And so
would they, I mean, imagine if I was a Mormon, what I would say is it's not that we didn't want blacks to be priests. Mm-hmm. It's just that culturally it wasn't a smart time to have blacks as priests.
No, it's much...
It's worse than that?
Yeah.
Okay.
And because I understand at the time, a lot of 19th century Americans believed that being black was a curse from God. This is part of the curse of Cain, or this is a curse of Ham. And you can find this reflected in the Book of Mormon itself. Like it reflects some of the racism of its day. And Brigham Young seems to have been much more racist than Joseph Smith was. Like Joseph Smith seemed like regular levels of 19th century white American.
Joseph Smith was like, I got black friends.
He wouldn't have, but he was against slavery, which at the time put him on.
What was Brigham Young doing that was uber racist?
Well, he would preach against the ugliness of the Negro race and the sign that this is a curse from God. He has, like, you can find much more shocking quotes from him.
So the Mormon will hear that and go, but guys, like you've had popes who had mistresses and who rode into battle and who stole the papal cutlery. Right. So we're the same.
Yeah.
So your objection holds no weight.
Right. So here, the idea is that it wasn't just a cultural vestige of the age. Because it's true. You can find people who believed things we would no longer believe because of the age in which they were. That their view of women or of other cultures or whatever we would say is unsophisticated, ignorant, and sometimes maybe even uncharitable. That's different than saying God has, cursed people with dark skin and making a theological kind of claim. And this theological claim, it's worth reading up on this. And I think it's tricky because with both plural marriage and this issue, there's two things. One is the offensiveness of the doctrine at hand, and two is the doctrinal reversal. And I'm not making a point about the offensiveness of the doctrine at hand. Like I'm not oblivious to the offensiveness. Right. I don't think anyone is oblivious to the offensiveness. But a thing can be offensive and true. Like some things are just unfortunate, facts don't care about your feelings, I believe. Some people in this very studio have said, yeah.
Never heard it.
My point is actually just about the truth claim. Like if you have this reversal, if you say A is true one day, and then A wasn't true. It's like we've always been at war with Eurasia. There's a certain sense of which you can't have this Orwellian view of revelation just reversing itself. And I think this is a point not just for Mormons to consider, but also for liberal Christians. Like if you think that the doctrines that were believed in yesterday can be overturned today and just declared, oh, those things were all wrong.
Yeah.
You have no ground to stand on to believe the doctrines you believe in today won't be regarded that way tomorrow.
So the question is, are Mormons atheists?
Yes, so that was a very long preamble.
It was a good one. It was a helpful one.
I think we have to distinguish in two ways. Philosophically, yes, they are, and that matters for some important reasons. Psychologically, no, they're not.
Okay.
So the reason I say this is because if you tell someone you're an atheist and they're like, I've devoted my life to following Jesus Christ and to serving Heavenly Father, this is a needlessly offensive sort of charge, and you're likely to just burn that bridge, and the person doesn't understand what it is you're saying.
We should distinguish between, am I speaking to a member of the LDS community?
That's right.
Or am I speaking to somebody who's asking questions about the LDS?
Right.
Very different how you might approach those things.
And how much they understand things like philosophy and logic is going to play a major role. Mormons actually have a very good, on the whole, a very good knowledge of Scripture and the ability to cite chapter and verse, much better than you might imagine. But what they don't have is philosophy.
Right. So given what you've said about LDS, flex in the joints, how many gods are there? According to the LDS Church, how many gods would Brigham Young say there were? And then how many gods would Jacob Hansen say there are?
And
I don't mean gods that we're bound to worship. I mean just gods.
Jacob was asked almost this direct question, because the question he was asked was whether God the Father had a God that he worshipped.
What did he say?
We don't know.
He said we don't know?
Yeah.
But I thought that was Mormon teaching that he did.
So it was.
It was.
But there's maybe a little flex in the joints.
Okay. I wasn't trying to be smart. I don't know.
No. This is a great question. So there's two things. One, how many gods are there? Two, what do we mean by gods? And this is going to get to the heart of what we mean in saying, philosophically, Mormonism is a species of atheism.
Okay.
Because imagine someone who says, I don't believe there's a God who created everything, but I do believe there's a spiritual realm of ghosts and demons and angels. And if you want to call some of those angels and demons gods, go nuts.
Yep, I get it.
But they didn't create the universe.
Right.
That is very similar, actually, to where a Mormon ends up.
Right, so
because
philosophically, they don't believe in a creator of all creation.
Yes, exactly. They reject the idea of creation from nothing. They believe in creation from pre-existing matter. And if you ask where that pre-existing matter comes from, you get the same kind of shrug of the shoulders.
Okay.
And
so God is not a creator. Their God, lowercase g, is not a creator.
Steel manning it, they're going to say he's a creator in the same way that any artist is a creator.
Okay.
Like when you create content, when you build a statue, we can call Michelangelo a creator in a certain sense, but he doesn't create the marble. He just turns the marble into something beautiful.
Athanasius is on the Incarnation. He talks about this.
Yes.
He makes this
I don't think he mentions Michelangelo, but you're right.
No, but he does make the distinction. If I'm not creating out of nothing, then I'm like a carpenter that fashions something. I make something. Right. I don't create it.
This is much more the idea of like what we would call a demiurge. So they don't believe in God strictly speaking. They believe in a carpenter, not a creator of everything.
Can we sum it up real quick and then air it out? Yep. My fear is that we're kind of beating, or maybe I keep interrupting you too much. But all right, so let me see if I can sum it up. So, what is God? God is the unconditioned ground of existence, the only uncaused cause, the metaphysically necessary being whose non-existence is impossible, the creator of all creation. That's what we mean by God. Yeah. Okay. Mormons don't believe in a thing like that.
Exactly. And
Am I wrong?
They would regard a thing like that as the corrupting influence of pagan philosophy.
So they don't believe in God.
Yeah, they don't. What we mean by God, they would reject as being contrary to Scripture.
But what we mean by God is correct.
Correct.
So they don't believe in God.
And so this
is that what you're saying, Joseph?
It is.
Okay.
That the arguments that would disprove atheism from reason are almost all of them.
Yeah.
Also arguments that disprove Mormonism.
Contingency argument.
Exactly.
Do that. Show us that.
So, okay. This is the third of the 5 ways that St. Thomas Aquinas lays out. And he says, you and I, we are contingent. We wouldn't be here without our moms and our dads and without water and oxygen and food and everything else. Our existence, it has a beginning. We only exist under certain conditions. We continue in existence under certain conditions, and we could be snuffed out of existence. So we exist under, we'll just say condition X. It's really like a billion different contingencies, but we'll just make it really simple. And then you look at any of the things that we are contingent on, our mom and our dad, or oxygen, or any of these things, and say, does that have to exist? Or is that also contingent? Well, it's also contingent. Everything I've said of you is also true of your parents. oxygen does not have to exist. We can look at all the biological reasons oxygen exists and so on. And so everything in the cosmos that we encounter is contingent.
Right
Here's
now.
the
Yeah.
here's the problem.
Mhm.
If you have only contingent things, nothing will ever come into existence.
Right.
Like if everyone else says, I'm only going to go to the party if that other person shows up first, no one's ever going to the party. You need something that is not contingent. You need something called necessary. Now, you can have multiple things that are necessary,
Sure.
but you need at least one, or else you can't have any existence. That's the first half of the argument from necessity. An illustration that can make this make sense. I'm marrying here a little bit of the argument from contingency and the argument from motion, so bear with me. It can be helpful for people in just explaining this. I explained this on a bar napkin one time in Arizona to a
Yeah.
guy who'd had a few to drink and was skeptical about God, and he got it.
Did he?
So that's
Pints
the
with
level I'm.
Pints with Heschmeyer.
Exactly. I just said, okay, imagine you come to a railway crossing and you see boxcars going by. Now, each boxcar is contingent upon the one before it. It wouldn't be there if there wasn't something pulling it along. And you flat surface, so you can't make the earth the thing that they're contingent on. We'll make it really easy. You don't see the engine car, but you know there has to be one. And it doesn't matter if you have 10 boxcars or a billion boxcars or any number of boxcars. The more boxcars you have, the more you actually need a very powerful engine to be pulling all of those things. So if you say, well, I'm contingent upon X and X is contingent on Y and Y is contingent on Z, these are boxcars. Because as long as you're pointing to more contingent things in that chain, you haven't gotten to the ground of anything existing. And so run that to ground, get to the engine car, and you need something that is necessary, but which also accounts for its own existence. Because you're not going to just arbitrarily say, well, you know what? We think there are always this many atoms in the universe. They just change their form. Or we think there is always space and time. Those things, you can't just arbitrarily choose something and slap the label necessary on it to get out of this. You can't use the brute fact kind of loophole that many atheists try to use. You have to have something that satisfies intellectually the whole that we recognize. Okay, the whole in what we experience is there must be something necessary or none of us would be here. We need something big enough to plug that hole, and that hole seems infinitely large.
Yeah.
And so it must be one who's able to account for its own existence.
Whose essence is existence.
Exactly.
Yeah. And we don't have that.
And this we all call God, Thomas would say.
Yeah.
So if that's true, that is going to take atheism off the table and it's going to take Mormonism off the table.
Yeah. And lay out why it's going to take Mormonism off
because
the table.
they explicitly deny that God is that. So first of all, he is material. He is made of matter. He has a body. Joseph Smith is very explicit about that in the first vision. He gives contradictory versions as to whether he sees one God or two personages. He originally just says he saw the Lord, and then he later says he saw two personages. At a certain point, there's a question about whether there's two or three. There's a very strange history in terms of how many personages there are in the Godhead. But one of the things that he's very clear on eventually is that the Father has a body. Now, originally, he doesn't say that. Originally, he says that Jesus is, what does he say? A personage of tabernacle, and the Father is a personage of spirit. So he seems to be saying that the Father is disembodied and the Son is embodied. But later, that'll get kind of retconned. That'll be changed. And now they both had bodies. And this is very clear in the King Follett discourse or King Follett's sermon. It's actually a funeral that he's preaching, and he's very clear there that God the Father, used to be a man, and then is glorified and elevated. By whom is completely unclear. Does he glorify himself? Some LDS, like Blake Ostler, seem to argue maybe he does a self-glorification, but
like the King of France.
yeah, but like, how do you give yourself omnipotence if you're not omnipotent? How do you? So that doesn't really work. And then you still have the question of, well, when God was on earth, who did he worship? Unclear. Like those are kind of some problems with that. Most Mormons historically have thought, well, he had his own God, and that God had his own God, and it's just turtles all the way down.
There you go.
And that's just more boxcars. Like that is not an actual engine kind of explanation, because then you're left without actually hypothesizing any kind of immaterial creator of matter, any uncreated creator of all things. And to the extent that you reject immateriality of God explicitly, then you're taking the God you're hypothesizing off of the list of possible candidates to be the God of this universe.
Now, a Mormon listening to you is going to say, you're trying to sit there and you're trying to make it seem ridiculous that God has a body. But guess what, Joe? You believe Jesus is God and you believe Jesus has a body. Not a problem.
Yeah, it isn't a problem to say that a human nature can be united to a divine nature. That's not inherently a problem. It would be a problem if you said God always had a body, or if you said he was given a body by some other spirit or some other being that is a separate divine being from God. Because then you've created this problem. Like if you said God the Father wants to become incarnate, I don't think that is philosophically precluded. So that's not the argument at all. But the argument is that on some planet, God the Father was once a man. It doesn't seem to have been Earth because this is a planet he created and populated. It seemed to have been some other planet he was a guy on. And so this starts to sound much more like the atheist who says, our planet is put here because aliens planted people here. It's almost exactly that. But the difference is one person calls themselves an atheist and one person calls themselves a Mormon Christian. But their belief about the origins are both an alien being put the first seeds of life here.
Okay, this God that Mormons today say that we're bound to worship, the Heavenly Father, okay, yes? Joseph Smith says he was once a man like we are now,
That's
correct?
Yes.
Do modern Mormons believe this?
Yes, but
Okay.
there is some, again, there's some flex in the joints.
Golly, it's like trying to nail Jello to a wall.
I used that exact expression in my debate with Jacob Hansen. And I think LDS listening to this should at least realize how difficult it is for non-LDS to fairly critique the position.
When they keep changing.
And when you can find LDS who just say, "Oh, well, we don't think that necessarily happened." But yeah, so
Okay, well, here's my question. Okay, let me just have two questions.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
The God that we are bound to worship, is it fair to say he was once a man like we are now, according to LDS today?
Yes, overwhelmingly.
Okay,
overwhelmingly.
So my next question, was he once a sinner?
That is a good question. This is one of the things that came up in the kind of dialogue so before the actual debate I did with Jacob.
And I guess what I'm asking is, what does official LDS sources say, even if they're mutable, and then what apologists
So to my knowledge, this is not something that the church has taken on head on, because it raises all these questions of, does he have human parents? Does he have, not just who is his God, but like does God have an uncle? Is there like a heavenly great uncle that we could be? And sure, we're not to have anything to do with him, but like, why not? If we're being invited into the family of God and we're ontologically the same as God, because this is an actual point that I think is very important. Talking to people who come from an LDS background, they really like the idea that we are not ontologically different than God. Now, we would say this is a huge difference. This is the difference between the boxcar and the engine car. This is the infinite difference between the uncreated creator of everything and his creation. Like, even if the author inserts himself into the story, he is different in kind from the characters created by the author. But they reject that difference because they feel a closer intimacy, thinking of God as being one of us, and us being one of whatever he is. So he doesn't create you. He gives you a body, but you have a pre-existing intelligence.
Am I as old as God?
There
is
is
by
no
God, lowercase g?
Yeah.
I'm as old as
You're infinitely old.
Right.
You're uncreated.
And that's something Mormons teach today.
It's even a point that they will use against Christians and say, you've got this problem of evil because the creation exists here without its consent. Everyone who's ever created by God did not consent to be created, and so therefore God is morally responsible for the evils in the world. Whereas in Mormonism, God's not morally responsible for the evils in the world because he's just kind of powerless too.
We got to give their God a different name so we know what we're talking about, like Jeff or something.
Odin, I mean, because it is much similar to some of the pagan conceptions of God.
Yeah.
Where you have gods that are demiurges or architects.
Tell our viewers what kolob is and if it's still taught and where
So
it is.
this is the idea, as we were talking about this planet being the
Earth?
one,
Yep.
our planet being populated by God, but him being from another one. So that raises all these questions of where is God's planet and is it in the cosmos? And particularly if God is material, how does that work? Is there, like, if we took a rocket ship far enough, could we
Yep.
find God's planet.
It almost seems like if the Big Bang Theory is true, it might disprove
That's right.
Mormonism.
That's right. I think that is actually correct. That if creation has a beginning, if time has a beginning, then some of these claims don't seem to work. And if their theory about how the Big Bang happens or any of this is just, well, it just happens on its own, then it becomes very clear that we're dealing with a species of atheism, a very colorful species of atheism, a spiritually rich species of atheism. But
What's bananas to me is the Mormons accuse the church, that might be the wrong word, of falling into a great apostasy.
yes,
But just from the little you've said in our interview today, it seems like I would have more reason to say Mormonism has fell into a great apostasy because from what I'm hearing, and again, I might be wrong and you can correct me because I know you want to be fair, that the difference between Joseph Smith and the early prophets to Mormonism today seems very, very, very different in its doctrines. Or is it?
yeah, I would say this. So give the task of trying to interpret with a hermeneutic of continuity,
Yeah.
both to Mormonism in the 19th century and Mormonism in the 21st century, and then Christianity in the 1st century and Christianity in the 3rd century. And it's much easier to see how Christians in the 3rd century are part of the same
Yes.
religion,
Yes.
believing the same things.
Yeah, we don't even have to. We don't even have to say all 2,000 years. There hasn't. We can
Right, you can just
because they believe it
take
happened
take an
sometime within
equivalently
those
long
3
chunk.
centuries. Big brands ruined deodorant. They irritate your skin, and most of them feel like a chemistry experiment. Deodorant brands sold us the idea that a louder scent means a healthier body. Here's the problem. Toxic ingredients, skin issues, they're common these days, extremely common, and it seems everyone knows someone with a skin condition. Here's the truth. Tallow is what families used for generations before chemical companies took over. It's what your skin actually understands because it's biologically appropriate, an organic compound that is similar to your skin barrier. I truly swapped my toxic deodorant for Cow Guys, a natural deodorant that actually works. Cow Guys is rancher owned and has no harsh chemicals. I promise you, your skin is going to love it. It's not only natural and safe, but this tallow-based deodorant is way more effective than most all-natural deodorant brands. It's crafted to keep you fresh all day. Search up tallowdeodorant.shop and get beef tallow balm for free. No special code is needed. That's 2 months of tallow balm plus a deodorant for $34. Buy from an American farm. They sent us a bunch of this stuff, and so I live in Florida right now. I'm commuting to Nashville. Whenever I come to Nashville, it's much drier than Florida, so I'm reliant on this product, which is fantastic. Also, I'll be honest, I was slightly skeptical about the tallow deodorant, but it works terrific. I've been using it, my wife uses it, and we really like it. So click the link below to grab a deodorant and a tallow balm for the price of one.
We should probably talk through what is and isn't meant by the Great Apostasy.
I want to do that. I just want to make sure we tie up whatever we were just discussing.
Well,
So
you
Kolob,
have these
Kolob.
oh yeah. So this is that question of like, this is God's kind of planet. And so that idea.
And who was that originally taught by?
I have to plead ignorance here. I don't remember.
If you're a Mormon watching, tell us in the comments.
Yeah, so apologies for that. I don't want to misrepresent.
Yeah.
And I know that this is sometimes raised to sort of point to the absurdity. And so again, let me just try to steelman it and just say, yeah, we believe Jesus has a body and is in heaven. We believe Mary has a body and is in heaven. So the idea of materiality in the heavenly realm isn't a problem unique to Mormonism. It's just that the answer given looks more obviously wrong from a mainstream.
Well, do they,
Christian perspective.
when they talk about Kolob, do they mean that to be in the heavenly realm?
What they mean by the heavenly realm is different because even the soul was understood as being made of very small matter. So, and I don't think that is actually officially taught by the church, but Brigham Young does talk about kind of particles to this. So that he even denies that the immaterial is strictly immaterial.
So if you are an apologist who's trying to interact with Mormon claims, are you saying that you'd spend your time better reading modern apologists than the earliest prophets?
Yes, because you can show that that the early like LDS prophets seem to be false prophets. You can show that they get a lot of things wrong. They make predictions that aren't true. They make these descriptions that are contradictory, that are no longer believed in by the LDS today. And the reaction overwhelmingly that I see to that is people sort of shrug their shoulders and say, well, that's not binding church teaching, so I'm not bound to believe that. I can think they got that wrong.
Who says what they're bound to believe then?
So there are what are called the standard works. So like
Okay.
the Book of Mormon, Doctrines and Covenants. These things.
But that teaches that God was once a man, doesn't it?
Well, this is a King Follett discourse, so not as directly.
Oh, okay.
So this is one of the last things Joseph Smith teaches before he dies.
Okay.
And so this is something Brigham Young expands on. So the status of some of this stuff, again, when you say about flexing the joints, now I would suggest a different standard. I would say, okay, it's abundantly clear from those who listened to him that Brigham Young taught that we should only be worshiping Adam. Even if you say that's not an official church teaching, one, I think that's actually not true. It was official church teaching, and we can talk about that. The 1877 Discourse at the Veil, it was part of the temple induction, as reported by multiple people that you were taught the Adam God doctrine there. Two, it was taught in Journal of Discourses. Now today, Journal of Discourses is not one of the standard works that Mormons are bound to believe, but it used to be. And so it used to be this source of official teaching and is no longer regarded. And three, Brigham Young explicitly taught this in the tabernacle while declaring it was impossible for the prophet to err on teachings in the tabernacle. And four, he describes this as a teaching of salvific proportion, that one's salvation, it turns on whether they accept Adam God or not. So all of that, I would suggest, points very clearly to this having been at one time official, binding, ex cathedra, if you will, LDS teaching. It is absolutely not LDS teaching today. It's not even a permitted opinion today. It is explicitly rejected. So there's two ways you could approach that. One is to say, well, this is as clear of a contradiction as you could possibly have. Like if the Pope just says, I declare this issue of faith and morals infallibly, and the next Pope says, you're not even allowed to believe what that last guy said.
Yeah.
Game, set, match, the Catholic Church is over.
I agree. And it's also important to realize that what we're saying is we're not making a I want people to avoid making a tu quoque fallacy.
Yeah.
Right? Because we're gonna have LDS in the comments who are like, yeah, well, what about you guys with this and that? Even if you're right.
Right.
All that would prove is Catholicism is false. And okay, maybe it is for the sake of argument. But when that doesn't make LDS true. And right? Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. And this, okay, the thing you're pointing now
going to be a lot
is so clear to us and is so confusing because one of the things that one of the earlier presidents taught, and this was not like an official teaching, but he gave a talk in which he basically said it's Catholics or it's us, and it's us. And so there is a kind of bifurcated view that many LDS have where they say, okay, well, either the Catholic claim is true or the Mormon claim is true because you need some leader who has universal jurisdiction, who has the keys of Peter, who is a successor to Peter. And the only two claimants to that are Pope Leo and the LDS president. And since the Catholic Church has gotten all this stuff wrong, it can't be them, so therefore we win by default.
Right.
That's kind of the way the argument works. In my debate with Jacob Hansen, he was operating within that framework. But if you don't come from that framework, it doesn't make any sense.
Right.
Because it's assuming certain things have to be true about the leader. But the only reason we believe those things are true about the leader of the church is because of claims that Jesus makes about Peter, for instance. And if those claims Jesus makes about Peter are true, then the papacy is true and the great apostasy is false. Now, here's what I mean. One of the reasons we would say, yeah, the successor of Peter, yeah, like you need to have the keys and all this, is because Jesus gives Peter the keys and promises the gates of hell won't overcome in Matthew 16. Well, you can't point to Matthew 16 as proof that you need this and then simultaneously say, we lost the keys, because the whole point of that passage from a Catholic reading is that this is given in such a way the gates of hell won't overcome. We're not going to lose the keys even for 1700 years, even for a day. Like the keys are not going anywhere. The gates of hell won't overcome. So you can't appeal to the common ground to build we both agree you need this kind of leader. We're going to have it because we don't actually agree. We make similar claims. We don't mean the same thing by successor to Peter. We don't think that the Pope is a prophet in the way that Peter was, receiving ongoing revelation, any of that. So we're using similar language, but we're meaning different things by it. So it's actually confusing to put things that way. So to any Mormons watching, don't try to build from that common ground of saying, well, we know it has to be one of the two of us, because a Catholic is going to say, we don't know it's got to be one of the two of us.
Even if they don't have that dilemma, it's still a common fallacious retort to say, well, what about you?
Right.
But saying what about you doesn't enable you to escape the critique we're currently leveling against you.
Exactly.
It could just be true that we're both wrong.
Right.
Right. So if you want to respond to Joe in the comments, instead of saying, well, what about you? You could try to defend the position with me.
Right. Like if you've got, like, take the Millerites. We'll take a nice neutral example.
Who are they?
In the 19th century, at the same time Joseph Smith is coming up, there's a lot of these different, like, strange movements within Protestantism, because you have the Great Awakening and the Second Great Awakening.
Right.
You have people who are becoming on fire for God, but without any formation, without any stable preachers. And then you have these different popular preachers going out there preaching contrary things. And Joseph Smith talks about this. Like, his family is divided about which Protestant denomination to follow, and they're preaching against one another. They're preaching all this contradictory stuff. This leads him to conclude that there's a great apostasy. It leads other people to just say, well, why don't we read the Bible for ourselves? And they go invent some new denomination and some new form of Christianity. So Miller was convinced that Jesus was going to return in 1844. And for those of you listening, he did not. And this is what's called the Great Disappointment. And because of that, you have this situation. Now, if someone wanted to critique Miller and say, well, obviously Milleritism is false, you coming back and saying, well, your guys make mistakes too, is a total deflection. It's not an actual logical answer to that problem. Because even if our guys make mistakes, even if we've followed some false prophet as well, your prophet is then revealed nakedly as a false prophet. Now, he wasn't claiming to be a prophet. He's just a bad reader of the Bible. But if you have a prophet making a claim and it doesn't come true, it's obviously disproved, that guy's out of the running. That doesn't automatically prove, like, if everything I'm saying about Mormonism is true here, that doesn't prove Catholicism is correct.
Right, of course.
But if Catholicism is true, that would disprove Mormonism.
I want to get to your debate with Jacob Hansen,
Sure.
But earlier I asked whether the lowercase g God that Mormons say we are bound to worship was once a man like us, and you say they're fine going along with that. And then I asked, was he a sinner? And I think you said...
I believe
have you heard
that he has an exaltation in the sense that he seems to have a redeemer, and he's offering worship. But I don't think this is something the church has taught in any official capacity.
Okay. So if you were to ask a modern day apologist, they would say we don't have
and you've got people like Blake Ostler who are trying to do things of trying to make a form of...
Who's that?
He's a theologian on the LDS side.
Okay.
And he's presenting some stuff that's not mainstream, but it's probably becoming bigger. And Jacob Hansen follows him. So you're going to find people like Jacob saying things that I think their parents' generation wouldn't have believed.
Okay.
There is this big shift because, look, the internet exists now. And a lot of the claims that people living in Utah a generation ago believed, we now know those things are false, and they know those things are false. So this is where the give and the joints has kind of worked, where the leadership kind of points in a different direction and says, well, we're not saying that. We didn't mean that when we said great apostasy. We just meant more revelation. We just meant the keys are taken away, the priesthood's taken away. But there's still a lot of great Christians. And so there you can kind of hollow out the doctrine without just reversing it. Or you can have things that just look like reversals, but you're encouraged to listen to the current president, to listen to ongoing prophets without stopping too much to compare. Well, how does that match up with the things we'd been told before? I think your example with the podcast of, like, the conspiracy theorists is kind of true. Because if you say, well, look, earlier you said this group did it. Now you say this other group did it. Were they working together? Or are you reversing yourself? But if they keep you going by just saying, oh, I've got all this new information. And unless you stop and say, what you're telling me today doesn't match what you told me a week ago, then you don't notice the contradiction, because they can spin a coherent, compelling story until you notice that it doesn't match the story that you were told earlier. And so that's how you want, I mean, this is true whether you're considering a podcaster, whether you're listening to a suspect in a crime who's given 5 different versions of where they were. You have to step back and say, okay, let me listen to what you're telling me today and see if I can harmonize that with what I was told previously. And if I can't, there's a problem here. It's fine. Like, just to be completely clear, it is fine to say you have new pieces of information today you didn't have before.
Yep.
That is not the objection. It may be that some prophet has some new insight that you didn't have before. That's not a contradiction. It is a contradiction if they're just absolutely 180 reversing what happened before and what was taught before as binding doctrine. Now, I'm going to tie up a loose end I left hanging. I I said I think Adam God was taught at the highest levels of authority, and I think that you can show that. Now, it wasn't written down in Doctrines and Covenants, so you can find a kind of counter argument, but it was taught in this official way. It was part of the secret temple induction ceremonies, and so we know this for a fact. It's very hard to get around any of this. And the first way people tried to get around it is you would have later LDS prophets saying, "Oh well, maybe this was misquoted or misheard." But you have other LDS future presidents, people who were not presidents of the church at the time, but were present and wrote about it in their own journals. So we know from the private writings from well-respected Mormon leaders that this is absolutely what Brigham Young was teaching because they wrote about it in their diaries. And so, just as a sheer matter of fact, this is what he was teaching. We can't get around that. You can leave the what level of authority question to one side and say, if somebody believes that you should worship Adam, that person is an idolater. That person is not a true prophet. You can't teach idolatry and be a true prophet. So Brigham Young is a false prophet. Whatever else may be true, even if he's just privately teaching we should worship Adam, fine. He's privately teaching idolatry, but he's doing it in the tabernacle, very publicly declaring everyone, as a matter of salvation, must be an idolater. And this is damnably false doctrine. And so, whatever you think of Joseph Smith, you should at least be able to say, well, his successor, Brigham Young, is clearly a false prophet. And
Is this what the breakaways from the original Mormon church point to? Do they point to
I
that?
think he said all sorts of stuff, even before this. I mean, that was, I want to say this is 1856, 1852. So this is like 8 years after. He'd been saying all sorts of things. He claimed that Joseph Smith taught this doctrine. And a lot of LDS today would say, no, he didn't. So Brigham Young's also apparently lying about what Joseph Smith was privately teaching.
So are Mormons, do Mormons today agree with you that Brigham Young, in this sense, taught idolatry?
They would say the Adam God doctrine is false.
Okay.
They don't explicitly call it idolatry. It's difficult to see how it doesn't meet even their own definition of idolatry. And so I think that is something worth reckoning. They would just say, well, this was never officially taught. This was just someone's theological opinion, and theological opinions can be wrong. But it's not just that it's wrong, it's that it's idolatry.
Yeah, if Mormon prophets have taught false things, including idolatry in the past, and if Mormon prophets don't necessarily have the gift of infallibility, what level of docility should a modern day Mormon have in respect to the current prophet when he teaches something?
What would I say, or what would they say?
Both.
So they're going to say you follow the standard works. So if it's at that highest level, you defer to that, particularly when it's the current leader. I think the question of how much they can err is something of an open question. But like, for instance, Joseph Fielding Smith said, President Brigham Young is quoted, "In all probability, the sermon was erroneously transcribed." But we've got so many different versions that everyone had to have just slipped with the pen in the exact same ways. And it just doesn't work. So they try to just say like, oh, maybe he didn't really. They just kind of kick up some dust. Spencer Kimball said he was alleged to have taught that. And then he calls it the Adam God theory. And he says, we denounce that theory and hope that everyone will be cautioned against this and other kinds of false doctrine. So he makes it a little iffy, like, well, we don't know for sure if Brigham Young taught it. We do know for sure Brigham Young taught it. By every standard you would normally know. I mean, this was in Journal of Discourses. You have LDS presidents like signing off on Journal of Discourses, like talking about the importance of it. And so it's just not true that it's just alleged to have been taught.
Yeah.
And it's not true that it was just a theory. It is a false doctrine. So they're clear that it is a false doctrine. But, you know, obviously it creates this big question of, well, if they can get things that wrong, they don't just get an attribute of God wrong, they're worshiping the wrong God. Then what else? What could they not get wrong? That it doesn't. It's hard to imagine something bigger than that. To say, well, should we worship God or Baal? Should we worship God or Adam? Like, well, if you've got that one wrong, I'm not worried about the details of the other stuff you might be claiming that this God told you, because the God you're claiming taught you things isn't even the real God.
I'm seeing a lot of people converting from Mormonism. Has that been a phenomena taking place since the advent of the internet more and more? What are you seeing?
Yeah, I think it absolutely is. And the latest numbers I saw, I want to say the retention rate for someone raised Mormon were something like 48%. So most are leaving, just slightly most. It's about a 50-50 kind of split.
Yeah.
And the Catholic Church isn't doing a great deal better
Right.
in terms of current adults who, who were raised Catholic.
Yep.
You've got a lot of people who are ex-Catholic, and so I saw that in one study, and it might be totally wrong. So I want to give that with lots of grains of salt.
A lot of flex in the joints. With
Exactly.
that study.
I'm not declaring that at the highest level of authority. This is me trying to remember
I
the
guess
study
what
offhand.
I guess what I meant though is I'm seeing a lot of. Maybe I shouldn't say I'm seeing a lot of.
Well, look, I can go anecdotally.
I mean, I don't just mean leaving the Mormon
Yeah.
communion. I mean a lot of Mormons becoming Catholic is what I'm saying.
Yeah, so I think this is where it's either us or the Catholics might be a natural pipeline.
Although I think if I were a Mormon and I became disillusioned with Mormonism, I've had some amazing ex-Mormons on my show who've become Catholics.
Yeah, Isaac
You know
Hess.
them.
Yeah.
What a guy. He's terrific. We
He
hope
is.
to have him back on. But I don't know even with me, if I came to a point where I was like, this is false. This is clearly demonstrably false. I think I'd just be an atheist. I'm not saying I should be.
No,
I'm saying
and
I
that's
think I
actually
might end up
that
being.
is the biggest place ex-Mormons end up is disillusioned with religion in general, because they realize that they didn't just get the Bible wrong. They were actively misled by their own church and the people they trusted the most.
All right, someone might say to you, but Joe, why are you attacking this amazing group of people? I mean, these guys are at least from what I can tell, and I know every community has their skeletons in the closet. Catholics are like every group of human beings is like this. So I don't mean to put them up on a pedestal, but from what I see, these are beautiful people who love their families. They have conservative values. They're attractive, and that's a big thing. I like attractive people. It's important to me as a non-attractive person to see attractive people makes me happy.
We've all seen your ankles.
You've all seen those are really good. I covered them up for the sake of the purity of my audience. However, I remember my wife coming out from Target one day. And she said, I just saw a family in there. They have like 7 kids. And I went, oh, did they look put together or disheveled? And she went, put together. I went, Mormons. If she had said disheveled, Catholics.
Yeah.
Why? Right. So why are we doing this? Why?
Well, I think
let's pick another opponent. Why are we doing this?
I would say this. 2 reasons. One, if it is important to be part of the flock of Christ for salvation, we should want everyone to be a part of the flock of Christ. We want people to be baptized with a valid Trinitarian baptism to become sons and daughters of God by adoption. All of that you can find in the New Testament. All of that you can find proclaimed by the earliest Christians. Like, this is something the early Christians went out wanting not just people to follow Jesus in their own way, but to be baptized into the family of God and to be part of the visible flock of Christ. That's the mission all of us should be on. And so I do a lot of work answering Protestant objections, who are actually much closer than Mormons are. They're already baptized into the family of God, but they're not completely in the fold of the flock of Christ. And so we want to bring them in out of love, not out of whenever you go out after anyone, you can do it in the spirit of trying to tear them down and just destroy. Or you can say, look, you already have all of this, which is good and true and beautiful, and you're being invited into so much more. And so that's the attitude I take, and the attitude that I hope everyone else would take. The second thing is we need more beautiful, put together, large families who
please help
come
us.
And yes, exactly. Like when you find someone who clearly is seeking after God, read John 10. Jesus says he's got other sheep that are not in the visible fold. And he doesn't just say, therefore, leave them alone. He says that they should be brought together so there can be one shepherd and one flock. It's precisely because they love God that we want to reach them and bring them into the family of God.
Now, do they love God?
Well, they seek after Heavenly Father. You can be radically wrong about the Creator and still have some good intentions. So this is where I'd say philosophically, they're atheists.
Yeah. Let's talk about that psychologically. Why did
psychologically?
You make that distinction?
Because someone who misunderstands what is philosophically true of God might nevertheless have God as the object of their worship and object of their affections. So the easy case would be something like a child.
Yep.
A child has a radically deficient theology.
Idiots.
Yeah, these imbecilic children. And they are nevertheless oriented in such a way that they're trying to worship God. Now, I know last time I was on the show, we actually talked about this a little bit in the context of Muslims worshiping God. So I don't want to get completely down already trodden paths, except to say, following Saul Kripke, he gives the example of you go to a Columbus Day parade and you say, who is this Christopher Columbus guy? And somebody tells you, oh, he was the first European to make it to the New World, and he's the first guy to realize the earth was round. Neither of those things are true. Is that person still talking about Christopher Columbus? They are. They're getting everything about him wrong. So it is possible to be oriented towards God as the object and still wrong about everything you're saying about him.
Okay.
Or at least wrong about a lot of the things. So you can be philosophically wrong about God. You can have such a skewed view of God
Yeah.
that he doesn't even deserve the title of God in your conception.
So philosophically and theologically, and by theologically I mean what has been revealed by the so-called Mormon scriptures, they're atheists.
Yeah, and this is relevant not as a pejorative, but it's relevant because the arguments against atheism work to disprove Mormonism as well.
Yeah.
And so it's relevant to know that information. But in terms of they're reading the scripture and seeking to follow
Right.
Jesus as they understand him in the scriptures, yeah, we would say same team.
So one thing you could say to a Mormon missionary who's beginning to be brought over to the Catholic side is, you don't have to discount this burning in the bosom. This experience you've had with Heavenly Father, I'm not telling you that's illegitimate, right?
Right, yeah, that's absolutely right. And so there is a certain kind of Christian who wants to say, well, look, they're theologically wrong about God, therefore they were never worshiping the true God. But think about it this way. Someone who is Jewish, who doesn't believe in the Trinity, but is reading the Torah and says, I believe that the God who revealed himself to Abraham is the true God, and I await the Messiah, and then you reveal Jesus to them, and they say, I want to follow him. He is the Messiah of Israel, and they come into Christianity. Were they just believing a complete false religion before? No. Like, take an easy example. They don't even leave the Talmud, all of that out of it. Just imagine it's 125
All right.
AD. They've never heard of the Trinity. They're not consciously rejecting it. They're faithfully following God as they understand him as revealed in the Old Testament,
Yeah.
which is not as they understood it, triune. They're philosophically wrong. They're getting something essentially wrong about God, but they are nevertheless oriented towards God in such a way that we would say, obviously we're building upon that, not just chucking it in the bin.
I wonder if it would be a little more modest and helpful and less offensive to say, I'm not claiming that any individual Mormon is an atheist. What I'm claiming is,
Right.
according to your own theology, God does not exist.
Yeah, or to put it a different way, the big distinction between a theist and an atheist is not on materialism. Because even though almost all atheists are also materialists, they believe
Right.
matter is all there is, that is not essential to atheism. And you'll find atheists who are not materialists, who
Right.
say there are spirits and they might be fine with ghosts, they might be fine with the spiritual realm, but they don't think that there's an uncreated creator of everything. On that on the actual fight between atheists and theists, Mormons are on the atheist side of the question. That there is not an uncreated creator of everything.
Let's talk about your debate, if you want to, with
Sure.
about Jacob Hansen, who is a really sweet guy. I mean, he
Yes,
came
he
to
is.
my studio, he debated Trent. He was only lovely
Yeah.
to us. I don't know if you still feel that way.
I do, actually. We had a very good kind of post-debate conversation that was very good.
Oh, that's good. I'm happy to hear that, because I think it's too easy in this day and age to attribute bad motives to people. And whenever we can not do that, we should do that. I mean, there are times where you have to attribute bad motives because it's abundantly clear. But all of this talk online today, like, oh, they're a liar. He's a liar. They're lying to you. He's malicious. You got to be really careful before you start throwing around accusations like that, I think. So I don't want you to get all into the weeds, but just for those who are coming new to the conversation, just sum up real quick what happened, and then we can get into whatever you
Okay,
want.
sure. I'll do it as quick as I can, but you've encountered me long enough to know that I'll do my best.
It's a long-form podcast.
Jacob invited me to debate the LDS claims about the Great Apostasy. And so he picked the topic, he picked me as the opponent, he picked the moderator, and then we settled on a Catholic church in Draper, Utah, St. John the Baptist, because I know the pastor there, and I thought, oh, Catholic church in Utah, it's as neutral of territory as you're going to possibly get. It was that or, find some sort of LDS place in Rome. I mean, it was not really. But
Is there an LDS
I
place
don't
in Rome?
think
There
so.
probably
I mean,
is.
It probably is. I don't know. But I'm not
there
sure. Could be.
Anyway,
Anyhow,
I'm derailing
it
you.
was.
Go.
Yeah, I don't need much derailing.
Much help.
So he gives the first speech, the affirmative opening. Anyone familiar with debates knows that the affirmative has the burden of proving the resolution.
That's right.
And the negative's job is just to show why that case doesn't work. So the affirmative has a lot of leeway in terms of how they understand and articulate and put the resolution forward. And the negative just has to show this case that they're making is not true.
So what was the resolution you agreed on?
That there was a great apostasy.
Okay.
I don't remember the exact wording, but like in the emails and everything, I think it was just worded, "Was there a great apostasy?" But he was very clear he wants to debate the LDS claims about the great apostasy. The opening words in his affirmative statement are that it is my responsibility to convince everyone, including Protestants and Orthodox, that the papacy is true and that they should, like the Pope is the successor of Peter. And I want to just like put my pen down there to be like, where am I? Like, which not only like that, I've just been told I'm the affirmative with the burden of proof, and that the topic is the papacy.
Why am I going second?
Right, right, exactly. Like, why not let me come up and give a full 18-minute speech on the papacy then? If I'm being expected to defend it, I should be allowed to have all the preparation of an affirmative. And people who don't debate probably don't realize how much. Because look, as a Catholic, if you want to approach me on the street and say, why is the papacy true? I can do an okay job. But if I'm being asked to give an 18-minute speech on the papacy with sources without being told we're going to be talking about the papacy as the topic, that's what looked bad, both in terms of shifting the burden of proof and in changing the topic. Now, I want to be fair to Jacob because a lot of Mormons said, I don't see anything wrong with this approach because it's logically us or Catholics. And if the papacy is not true, then we're obviously right. Or at least if the papacy is not true, then there must have been a great apostasy. And that is logically invalid unless you assume a bunch of different things. And I think, in fairness to Jacob, what was probably happening is he was assuming we all know that there has to be someone with universal jurisdiction. There has to be someone who's a successor of Peter, who's receiving ongoing revelation, and all I have to do is show that that guy doesn't exist and the Pope isn't him. Now, we would actually say, yeah, there's not anyone who is receiving revelation in the sense Peter did after Peter. This is a not controversial claim. Now, we would say that's not an apostasy. That was part of the plan of God. And you can see this in the first century itself. So First Clement, in First Clement paragraph 42, talks about how the Father sends Jesus and Jesus sends the apostles and the apostles send the bishops and the deacons. Now, that's very clear. So Jacob rhetorically would just say something has been lost, but that presupposes something was meant to continue on and didn't. And he doesn't show that something was meant to be continued on. And a really good indication that you have that there wasn't something that continued on is the fact that nobody talks in this way. Like the first apostle to die is in about the year 42. It's James, the brother of John. We read about it in Acts. I mean, I'm leaving Judas off the list. He's technically the first to die, and they replace him. They don't replace James. Now, if that's the sign of an apostasy undergoing at that moment, like the people have become so wicked that God is not going to replace any new apostles, so there will be no future guidance of the church, you would expect the other apostles to write about that, to preach about that, to warn the people, hey, God is withdrawing his hand of protection. And ironically, this case is stronger the more you listen to the LDS claims, because they will say one of the ways we know that there must be a prophet is God says in the Old Testament, he won't do anything without revealing it first to his prophets. Great. So now you have to believe if an apostasy happened like this, God removed the keys, he removed the priesthood, he must have told the apostles this was happening. And they don't warn anyone? What horrible shepherds they were. What horrible preachers they were. If you know Nineveh is falling and it's going to be destroyed and you don't go out and preach, there's something wicked there. That's Jonah. He has to be redirected to told. You can't let people fall into that and not tell them. And so all of the arguments for, oh, well, there must be a prophet so someone can hear the revelation of God and know that things going to happen next would obviously apply to the great apostasy.
Look, are you tired of sending your money every month to a phone company that does not share your values? I want to tell you about our sponsor, Charity Mobile. They're different. They're proudly pro-life and they're not apologizing for it. Here's what I love. Every month, they take a percentage of what you pay and send it directly to the pro-life, pro-family charity that you choose. Over the last 30 years, that's added up to millions of dollars, making a real difference. And here's the thing, you're not sacrificing anything. Plans start under $50 before taxes and fees. You get the same nationwide coverage as the major carriers, but when you call customer service, you're talking to actual pro-life Americans who care about helping you. Right now, if you're a new customer, use my code MattFradd and you'll get a free phone with every new line, plus they'll waive activation and shipping. It's pretty simple. Why not have your phone bill actually support what you believe in? Check out Charity Mobile and see for yourself. To get started, visit CharityMobile.com/MattFradd. That's CharityMobile.com/MattFradd and use promo code MattFradd at checkout.
When you go throughout Scripture, you can find these very clear, unambiguous proclamations of things like the destruction of the temple, the Babylonian captivity, the destruction of Samaria. All the major events in the history of Israel are foretold prior to happening in explicit terms. You can look at them afterwards and say, aha, that clearly happens. You don't have anything like that for the fact that there was apparently an ongoing apostasy happening either in or immediately after the time of the apostles.
So how did the debate go? Other than
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. The people there very gracious. Both the Catholics and the Mormons who were there were incredibly lovely.
was it like a battle of people trying to be kinder than the others? Like, please stop.
Every time I've gone to Utah, I've come away with stuff I didn't come with.
Oh,
I've
yeah?
been 3 times, and all 3 times I've had more stuff coming back that was just given to me.
I really have such respect for many of the things Mormons do, and that's not just a throwaway line to sound like I'm trying to be gracious right after I've said they're atheists. When I used to work in the anti-pornography realm,
Mhm.
I used to speak about this, write about this a lot. Everyone who was doing amazing work in that area ended up being a Mormon.
Wow.
I'm being a little hyperbolic, but I would learn about people doing incredible work helping men or women overcome pornography, and I'm like, oh, I bet they're Mormon.
Yeah.
And I would ask them, and they were. So
Yeah, I think this is one of those areas. I heard Peter Crave say many years ago that we should learn from what's best in all of these other systems. So if you've got Muslims praying 5 times a day, you should go pray 7.
100%. No, I'm with you. We have to learn from
Yeah, or 100 times a day. I mean, if you want
a
that sounds more
100.
OCD.
Yeah, that's
But
right.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
the reality is we should look at these things and say, you're doing this thing that's really good
Yeah.
and that is in some ways a little bit of a rebuke
Yes,
that
no,
I'm not doing more.
100%. No,
Like if you've been given 5 talents and you're doing less than the guy with 2
I remember
talents.
my wife and I were flying out of New York City, and you see these Mohammedans doing their prayer rule outside of. They must have been working for the airport, and there they were. And I thought, there's a lot to learn there.
Yeah.
They put many Catholics to shame
Oh,
with
I
their
went to Georgetown
commitment
for
to
law school.
prayer, with the way they fast,
Yeah.
right? And so we can acknowledge these as basically good, right?
Yeah.
Not commenting on whether they're worshiping God. You don't have to do that. You can just say, look at the commitment they
Yeah,
have to their religion.
the drive.
Yeah.
Even if you're driving in the wrong direction, St. Paul can talk about how zealous he was for God while he was killing Christians.
Well, look at the Shabbat. I mean, the Jews.
Yeah.
I'll text Ben, and I'm very great. He never texts me on Saturday.
Yeah.
Saturday night, I might get a text.
Yeah.
I just love that commitment.
Right.
And then you look at us, and we can be really sloppy. I understand we're not required to keep it in the same way, but we might go shopping and doing all
Yeah.
sorts of things. We don't even really think about what it looks like to have a day of rest.
Yeah. I was trying to say I went to a Catholic law school, and yet in the chapel, there was a sign pointing which way Mecca was because it was used as much by the small handful of Muslims as by the handful of Catholics, which was convicting. Of like, we need to get our act together better, and it shouldn't be like that. Like we should be the ones who have that reputation for prayerfulness, or in the Mormon case, we should be the ones with this reputation for generosity and hospitality and all of this. So we can look at that and say, without there's a way of doing that just is kind of like kind of saccharine, but I think
Yeah.
authentically.
No, I agree.
There's a lot of things where they clearly, their hearts are in the right place and their drive's in the right place. There's some theological and philosophical problems being made that have really important consequences.
What's the future? And I want to wrap up our discussion
Yeah.
on Mormonism here. What is the future? What does the next 5 years look like, would you say, between Christians and Mormons?
That's a good question. I think that they are becoming part of the public consciousness in a deeper way, that they were on the fringes of the periphery. And then in our lifetimes, they've become more well known and were originally an object of just mockery and derision by a lot of Americans. South Park, the Book of Mormon musical, all this stuff.
Yeah.
And I think now you're going to have more of an appreciation for the unique kind of genius that you find within Mormonism, but also more of an engagement with the obvious logical and philosophical and theological problems. So I suspect you're going to see more of 2 things. One, you will probably get Christians who convert to Mormonism because they realize it's stronger than it was presented to them as.
Mm.
For a lot of people growing up, they were given such a caricature of Mormonism.
Or they were given what Mormonism was 100 years ago.
Sure, I think
Maybe
you
it
get
wasn't a
kind of a
caricature.
combination of
Yeah.
both. But then you hear the actual claim, then, oh, okay, it's actually better than you thought.
Yeah.
You can set the bar so low
Yeah.
that they clear it just by not being kind of a cartoonish caricature. On the other hand, I think when you have the charitable nuance, good faith engagement, I do think Mormons, as they discover some of these problems, and also as they realize this isn't just a problem with religion itself, this is a problem with their particular religion. Because a lot of them are going to just say, I guess religion is irrational. I guess, religion's contradictory. And it's like, no, that's a very unique experience you're having of being taught these
Mm.
different things on Wednesday than Tuesday. That's not the experience Christians have. All the faults we may have, all the experiences we may, we don't just have a series of prophets telling us contradictory things. And so in that sense, I think you're going to have some people who become disillusioned with Mormonism and become, agnostic, atheist, irreligious, etc. I think you're also going to see mark my words on this. You're going to see an ongoing watering down of some of the theological distinctives of Mormonism on the sexual front. Some of the things we actually agree on now, they aren't standing up as strongly to the culture on some of those things when you actually get into the weeds.
Like what?
Well, on abortion, but also on homosexuality. So on abortion,
I thought they were good on abortion.
they are mostly good on abortion. Now, I'll give you this. This is a great talking point with Mormons. If you want to invite the Mormon missionary in, it may not be fair to do a full-on theological debate, although honestly, if you're sending a missionary to someone's house, you can hardly complain that they're debating theology. Fine. But they're 18, 19-year-old kids. So they're far from home and they're trying to serve God. So you want to do it in a respectful way.
Yeah.
One thing I have found very helpful is just to establish with them where we agree on abortion. But their church refuses to call abortion murder because they sometimes permit it. You need to pray on it and get the permission of the bishop, but you're allowed to abort. And logically, this is just caving to.
So according to Mormonism, you can sometimes kill an innocent human being and
Yes.
be justified in doing so.
That's right. And they stopped short of calling it murder because and this was another thing that I pressed Jacob about in the event we had prior to the debate. And he just said, well, we don't know for sure when the soul enters the body.
Yeah.
He took the Nancy Pelosi out. And that sort of thing is really alarming. So you're going to find more Mormons who are exposed to things like that, which are their own church's teaching. They don't even realize are their church's teaching. And so you're going to have this caving to culture on abortion and on homosexuality.
Now tell me about that, because I thought they were pretty good when America tried to pretend that two men could be married.
Yeah, they were. But there is a lot of an internal push on this. And so I don't...
Internal push?
Yeah, within
so
Mormonism,
within the ranks,
you have people saying like, oh, well, maybe it's, maybe we're being too hard on this issue.
Well, yeah. I mean,
so I don't know what that's going to mean.
If your doctrines and morality can change.
Right. I don't know a reason why. Like, if you can get something like marriage wrong on plural marriage, that can reverse.
What about contraception and masturbation?
I don't know much about it. To be honest, I've never talked in any great detail on those issues with them.
Mm.
So,
all right. So you're going to start to see that, you think? You said, I
think,
words. You said.
Yeah. I think on the issue of same-sex behavior, maybe same-sex marriage, but at least homosexuality in some way, you're going to find more kind of squishiness because there are activist forces in the works in the church, and they don't have the divine protection.
What about transgender stuff? Are you seeing much of that?
I don't know.
I know you're not the spokesman for Mormonism.
No. Right.
To be clear, I understand that.
I don't know. I don't know what that's going to look like.
Yeah.
And we might be moving in some ways past that fight,
right,
at a cultural level, because I think the sort of accept this or else days are largely ebbing because they're realizing there's not a big if you want to talk about things with bad philosophy, it's not just Mormonism, it's also transgenderism.
Yeah.
In very different ways, but there's just no anthropology. So yeah, I think it'd be very interesting to see.
It'll be okay. Here's another question: where do you if Mormon doctrine is not infallible or inerrant, as they say themselves, and it has evolved such that we can say, well, that was wrong, and here's what we teach today. Where do you realistically as Mormons continue to be pressed, where do you see Mormon doctrine evolving to?
Yeah, well, that's where I'm imagining you'll find more.
And I don't just mean about moral truths. I
Yeah, well,
mean,
that's where I think that there's going to be more of this, because I think that's where a lot of the heat and the pressure is coming from. That I think you're going to see two things. One, you will see more of a softening of the Mormon position towards Trinitarian Christianity, where there was much harsher language used in the late 19th century and early 20th century, and you see a move as they get to have Christian neighbors and they realize the Christian neighbors aren't trying to kill them like they were experienced in the early days. There's a softening, and they start to realize, like, oh, maybe God's working through these people as well. And you get some of that in Joseph Smith. It's a tonal shift more than a substantive shift, maybe.
Mm.
But I think you're going to continue to see sort of that more of an ecumenical, interreligious approach. Uh, so I don't know. It's hard to guess. It's hard to guess where it's going to go. But that's where I would see you're going to see some more softening and some more vague statements that sound much more Christian friendly. There was a very intentional rebrand. So even terms like LDS, it was called the LDS newsroom and everything else just a few years ago. They, under the prior president, had a massive rebrand to call it the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or I guess 2 presidents now ago, where they stopped, I believe, on Google Maps. They used to have the angel Moroni, which is one of the characters in the Book of Mormon, and they replaced it with a picture of Jesus, or with a cross. Sometimes you'll even see. Now, historically, crosses were not used in Mormonism. And so they're trying to present as more of a Christian movement, where they would never have just out and out denied that, but you would find some earlier Mormon writers who distinguished Mormonism from Christianity. And young Mormons, I think, overwhelmingly think of themselves as Christian. And it's just like, well, there's just different flavors. There's a Catholic, Orthodox,
Yeah.
Protestant,
Well,
Mormon
this is
flavor.
why I don't love that you keep referring to them as LDS. I understand Latter-day Saints. I understand that you're trying to be respectful, but if it's a propaganda
Well, no,
move,
they would say LDS is now actually an outdated term.
I know, but
Now
you're
it's
not
Church
using
of
the
Jesus-
word. You said Mormon earlier, and when I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but neither am I.
Right.
But why do we have to tell a heretical group? I'm using that word broadly.
Yeah.
'Cause they weren't Christians, but why do we have to go by what a non-Christian group says about itself if it's just muddying the waters?
Well, I think for the sake of clarity and charity. So I'm fine using terms like Eastern Orthodox, even though I don't think they're the ones who are Orthodox on the questions that we're disagreeing on. But it's the term they're known by. And as a Catholic,
So if they
you
changed their
kind of-
name to the True Church of Jesus Christ, would you call Orthodox that?
if there was a lot of the reason I don't say Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is just because it's a mouthful. So true church is pretty much what Orthodox Church means.
No, but I'm just saying, if the Eastern Orthodox, let's say the Russian Eastern Orthodox Church, I know we're just spitballing here, but if they chose to change their name to the one and only True Church of Jesus Christ, presumably you wouldn't start calling it that.
No, but my reasons for not calling them that would be almost exclusively how clunky it is, and that would be more confusing.
But if they had a really succinct way of saying we're right and you're wrong, you would go ahead and
succinct
say it.
way of saying that would be Orthodox.
Yeah.
And calling themselves the Orthodox Church, they're implicitly calling everyone else heterodox.
Yeah, but what I'm
and we
saying
use
is,
that term.
Yeah, but it seems like there was a shift within the Mormon community to make them seem like mainstream Christians.
That's right.
That's the difference, right?
That's right. It is marketing.
yeah.
And
So why go along with it?
it's-
Charity
it's
and clarity, I get it,
right.
but I don't know.
But the clarity part is important. I mean, look, you've had situations, I'm sure, where someone will say, "Oh, you Romanists or you Papists," and you just roll your eyes and know whatever they're going to say next is going to be the dumbest thing I've heard today.
Uh-huh.
Because they're not approaching with the kind of
They're not trying to
intellectual
understand
charity.
where you're
right.
Yeah.
And I don't want to do that to Mormons.
Yeah, well, we got to thread the needle, though, because I agree, we want to be charitable, but I also don't want to start speaking of them in a way that would lead other people to think I think they're Christians.
No, I think if I say the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is teaching atheistic philosophy, no one is going to hear that and be like, "Oh, well, you did say the Church of Jesus Christ, so I guess." And so, yeah, it probably is situational to a certain point. I don't think anyone who's hearing certainly this conversation is going to come away saying, "Oh,
Joe Heschmeyer."
yeah, Joe thinks this is the real Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints." Like, we've had the saints in the early days and in the latter days. That we're the church with the saints following Jesus. We have even canonized them. Like, we clearly aren't conceding the substance, but there is. And you see this even within the Vatican itself. You'll refer to, the Archbishop of Canterbury, even though they're not a real archbishop. It's a lady pretending to be an archbishop. And even if
And
she
would
wasn't a lady, it still wouldn't be an archbishop.
and would you find it offensive if I referred to her as the lady pretending to be an archbishop?
In some contexts, that's fine. How productive is that?
Again, this goes back to what we said earlier. That you speak differently, just like an LDS would admit this, right? Like an LDS sitting down with his LDS friend, having a root beer.
Yeah,
You like that?
I
Root beer?
do.
Thank
Yeah.
you. And they're critiquing the Catholic Church, and they might have strong language, and good for them, so they should if Catholicism is false. When they engage with a Catholic, they're going to try to be charitable so that you can know that they're a person of goodwill.
Yeah, I just think that I would rather save the ammunition for the substantive critique rather than the name calling. Like if I'm burning the bridge over, I'm using a term that they find offensive, I'm burning the bridge needlessly. I'd
Okay.
rather burn the bridge over, you guys are teaching these things that are dangerous to
You might
salvation.
be convincing me, so I'm open to changing this. I've been calling it. I honestly didn't know Mormons saying that was offensive. I really didn't.
It was. I mean, Mormon was a name given by outsiders. It was it's honestly a helpful term because not every Mormon is LDS. Because remember, there is that split right after Joseph Smith died.
Oh, I see. So you're distinguishing the
So,
type of Mormon.
Yeah, LDS Mormonism is by far and away.
Did they used to call themselves Mormons?
You will find them using the term, but again, it seems to be kind of like how we took the term Roman Catholic. Roman Catholic was a term we were originally called.
By the Anglicans.
Yeah, because they were like, we're Catholic and you're Catholic. You're just the Roman Catholics and we're Anglican.
Yeah, it was
Catholics.
a pejorative, right?
Right. And so you will occasionally find Catholics who use Roman Catholic now because it's
Well, there's a sense in which
entered
we
the
can
vernacular.
use it, especially in
Right.
distinction to the Eastern churches.
Yes, and that's where it becomes
Muddy.
confusing.
Okay.
Right.
So you're saying the Mormons never call themselves Mormons?
The Mormons
And they
did
never
not
liked
give
that.
themselves the term.
Okay.
And there was internal stuff from the president to push against those kind of terms
From the
in
get-go.
favor. More recently,
Okay.
there was an intentional kind of marketing push.
What did they call themselves 100 years ago?
I think LDS or Latter-day Saints.
Is that right?
So
right,
Latter-day Saints is a fairly neutral. Like that is not a term that
All right, I'll call them
is
LDS.
imposed by the outside.
You've changed my mind. I'll
Alright,
call them LDS
excellent.
from now on. Yeah, thank you. You won the debate. Now let's talk about your recent interaction. What happened with this Orthodox thing?
Oh yeah.
By the way, you're very good in debates,
Oh,
and so is Jacob. Like I thought the exchange that the two of you had on Bertuzzi's channel after the fact. Yeah, I thought you both acted like gentlemen.
I love that kind of approach. And Jacob is someone who, I was frustrated after the original debate because I didn't know if he was trying to be clever or if this was just really where his reasoning ended up. So I called it out, but I was clear. It felt dishonest. I'm not accusing him. Like I'm just saying this is how it came off. Of saying you've got the burden of proving the papacy when I don't have the burden, and we're not talking about the papacy. But afterwards, he explained his own reasoning, and even though I disagree with logically where he ended up, it seemed to be coming out of a place where it wasn't bad faith, and I tried to acknowledge that publicly as well, and we had, I think, a great conversation afterwards.
Good for the two of you for doing that.
Yeah, I'd be happy to engage with him again, where we can have a respectful.
You'd be very clear though in the resolution.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'd be happy. I actually think the moderated discussion we had on capturing Christianity afterwards, where we both could just speak it in more of this way, of like an immediate conversation. We can ask for clarity.
Seemed way more productive.
Yeah, I think it was.
All right.
So Justin Menard, who has an Orthodox channel, I believe it's called The Transfigured Life.
Okay.
He reached out to me and said, hey, you did a video on why you're not Eastern Orthodox, and there's an Eastern Orthodox attorney who it'd be great to have you guys sit down and have a charitable dialogue. And he compared him to a well-known Protestant apologist and said he's like a more charitable version of this person. And I was like, great. I don't know who this Alex Soren guy is, but he sounds like he's very intelligent, and it sounds like we could have a nice charitable discussion. And so I've been traveling a lot. I was at Seek, and I came home, and I got immediately sick. And one day in the middle of the night, my 2-year-old fell out of bed. So that was, I'm home. I'm gonna take care of this. I'm already not feeling great.
Fell out of bed like from a top bunk or just?
Rolled out of a regular sized bed, but he'd fallen asleep. He has a little bed on the floor. Had gotten out of that bed, so I put him in the guest room bed. This was entirely my fault. Put him in the guest room bed.
As my wife tells me.
He then rolled out of that bed in the middle of the night. So I was like, oh shoot. And so I'm home. It's my fault he was in there in the first place. I was convinced he couldn't possibly roll out. His rolling ability was better than my guessing ability. And so anyway, all that's to say, I'm awake and against my will. So I go on Twitter, and he had apparently had a debate, I think the night before, with Elijah Yassi on Catholic Orthodox.
Yeah, he's terrific.
And I had not and still have not seen the actual debate. I've seen 2 clips now, I think. But the amount of nastiness afterwards was just completely dispiriting. A lot of
Afterwards?
yeah, on Twitter, a lot of
Oh.
like, "Oh, our guy totally wrecked your guy. You guys stink. You destroyed him. Trash crashing out." Like, and some of that you're going to get every time because you get a bunch of guys who are just fanboys. And Catholics have this. There's a huge culture of this among kind of these Ortho-bros, and it's spiritually immature. It's not charitable, and it's the kind of thing I really want no part of.
Yeah.
And so seeing Alex engage with some of that stuff, he was not the worst offender. I mean, a lot of other Orthodox were worse than he was.
Is he the fellow who you were
Yeah,
gonna
he was the
debate?
guy I was going to, and I just,
And he was being kind of
he was sort of part, I mean, he
Snide.
was like sharing some of the stuff and retweeting stuff, and it was just, and he was accusing Eric Ibarra, who you and I both know and love,
what a
and he
guy.
was one of the fairest guys. He was accusing him of lying about obscure historical details.
Come on.
And I'm sure part of it was just being somewhat sick and already feeling like overwhelmed by travel and sickness. But I just looked at that and thought, I want absolutely nothing to do with this. Like, I don't want to watch this debate. I don't want to be part of this. I don't want to engage with these uncharitable trolls.
Yeah.
Like, I'm happy if you have a spiritually mature Orthodox who says, what are the differences between Catholicism and Orthodox? I'm happy to sit down and do that. But if it's just going to be like Jay Dyer's fanboys, there's something so toxic about that these are just young guys who are being led in a disgusting direction. I'm just going to say it very bluntly. This is Andrew Tate for orthodoxy. It's just like, I don't want any part of that because I think that this is the opposite of what we should be as Christians. Not even getting into the particular nuances of Catholicism and Orthodoxy. If your thing is just calling everybody gay online and how edgy can you be, grow up. Like, dude is 40 years old, more than 40. What are you doing?
And
I get his fans being like that, but I don't want, like, you're not gonna, you might as well go and say, like, I think the next debate should be at a frat house. Like, you're not gonna have a meaningful, productive, charitable Christian conversation.
to be
if
clear,
that's-
we're
that's-
both agreeing that there are probably Catholics who
Oh,
act
no,
like
yeah, I should be very clear. There were Catholics who were absolutely a part of the problem with that as well. But it was just drawing out the worst elements of the Catholic and the Orthodox side. I also want to be clear, there are a lot of great Orthodox who aren't doing any of that.
1,000%.
I just saw that and thought, that's not going to be a meaningful discussion. So it was 2 things. It was that, but it was also the idea that the way we're going to settle whether the papacy is true is obscure debates about the acta of a council most people have never heard of. Strikes me as itself a gross misunderstanding of how Christianity works. By which I mean, one of the major points Christians made in regards to Gnosticism was you don't need some secret teachings that only the intelligentsia or the elect, this secret gnosis knowledge. And so Jesus preaches openly. St. Paul says these things didn't happen in a corner. Like, Christianity is open and it's public and it's clear, and anyone from the most terminally online bro to the person who's like the 80-year-old grandma can know where Christianity is and what the true church is. This is one of the reasons Jesus compares the church to a mustard seed that grows into a mustard tree. It's the largest of all the plants of the garden. Christianity, it should not be hard to understand. It should not be hard to follow. Now, that's not to say there aren't complicated doctrines. There are. But it shouldn't be hard to know, okay, where should I go? I want to follow Jesus. Where should I go? One shepherd, one flock. He has the largest church on earth, and we can find that. The idea that we're going to arrive at the right answer by some obscure document that 99.0% of Orthodox and 99.0% of Christians are not aware even exists, and that's going to be the make or break moment for this, is such a misunderstanding of Christianity itself. It's much closer to Gnosticism than it is to Christianity. And one of the other ways I would say it, and I think this is a problem within Orthodoxy as well as within Protestantism, and almost all the guys doing this are converts from Protestantism and are still approaching apostolic Christianity with a Protestant framework, whether they know it or not. In Protestantism, you have this problem of sheep needing to self-shepherd because you can't trust that your church has gotten it right. So you have to go and educate yourself on all the theology and then find a church that agrees with you. That's not anywhere in the New Testament the model of what the laity are called to do. Now, by all means, if you want to go and read up on a lot of theology, wonderful, that's great. But the idea that you have to do that so you can figure out the true church, it completely misunderstands the role of pastors, of leaders, of a magisterium. And so doing the Protestant version of that of, okay, well, I've read all these books and now I'm going to become a Methodist, or then I'm going to become a Baptist, and and you've got people passing each other, going to the opposite denominations because they read different books. That whole self-shepherding sheep problem is a real problem. Orthodoxy has this problem as well, particularly among what they call the converted docs, like these former Protestants who are now Orthodox, and they've realized that the Catholic things were right on things like the episcopate, and that they were right about the Eucharist, they were right about all of this, but they don't want to become Catholic. So they go choose one of the various forms of Orthodoxy instead, Oriental Orthodoxy or Eastern Orthodoxy, and they just choose the church that they agree with the most or that they like the vibes of the most, because Russian Orthodoxy is really tough, and if you wanna be a little softer, you go Greek Orthodox. Like, that sort of thing. That's not how Christianity is meant to work. And so if that's what we're doing, of just playing this self-shepherding game, and the whole thing's gonna turn on, "Oh, you're lying about how you're reading this 6th century document," we're just doing the wrong project there. And I think we have to have a more fundamental discussion about how we come to know the truth and how we're meant to determine what the true church is. Like, it's wonderful. If Alex Soren is brilliant and knows a lot of ancient church documents, that's great. I don't really know the guy, but I'm happy to assume that he does. But if you have to do that to be able to know the true church, something has gone deeply, fundamentally awry with how you're arriving at the church.
When were you scheduled to have the debate?
We were in April 28th, I think.
Oh, wow. So a while away.
No, yeah, it was months. I wouldn't, if it was like a week
I
away, I wouldn't have.
I got the impression it was the next day or
No,
something.
no.
Okay.
It was months away. I hadn't done anything for it. I assume he wasn't already preparing for it. And we had actually still been hammering out the terms of it as well. So it wasn't like we'd already said,
Yeah. Oh, I see. Okay. That's
I
very
backed out of
different.
my own ordination to the diaconate with less notice than I backed out of that debate.
Ah,
Uh, so, and yeah, it was just kind of like, if that's what you're wanting out of a discussion, like, let's say I'm wrong. Let's say, like, my whole approach is wrong, and you want somebody who's gonna get super deep in the weeds of the arcana of patristic or later documents. I actually love patristic writings on papal stuff, fine, all that stuff. You can have someone who will happily have that debate with you. I find that to be a waste of time largely. Like, I don't think that's what's moving people to convert overwhelmingly. I think it just kind of reaffirms people's priors.
This episode is proudly sponsored by Catholic Match. With Valentine's Day being this month, our culture tells us that dating apps are the way to go. But really, they're mostly about superficial connections and endless swiping, where half the people don't even know what they truly believe or what they're actually looking for. But if you are a Catholic, you understand that marriage is a sacred vocation, not just another relationship. And this season of love reminds us we're called to something deeper. That's why there's Catholic Match, which is the largest and most trusted Catholic dating app in the world, purposefully designed for faithful men and women who are serious about finding each other for the right reasons. Catholic Match is focused on sacramental marriage, bringing together singles who share the same ultimate goal, a lifelong covenant blessed by the Church. Unlike generic platforms, Catholic Match features an in-depth profile system that goes into the things that really matter. Where do you fall politically, your liturgical preferences, how you approach your faith in daily life, and so much more. Plus, Catholic Match offers live, virtual events exclusively for premium members, creating opportunities to connect and grow together in faith. This February, let the month of love be about more than chocolates and flowers. Download the Catholic Match app or head over to catholicmatch.com today and find your forever. Again, that's catholicmatch.com. Can we talk about this phenomena in general that we might be seeing online, where people speak, what is it, sardonically? Is that the word?
Yes.
And look down their nose at others and maybe speak with perpetual irony,
Yeah.
and call everyone gay. I wish we'd stop doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are you seeing? What's the apologetic landscape looking like, or maybe the
Yeah,
internet
I think
landscape?
this is becoming a big issue. How controversial do you want to take this?
You can do whatever you want to do.
All right. One of the things I find confusing about knowing how to engage with, like, the followers of Nick Fuentes.
Yeah, the groypers.
Yeah, is that Fuentes will say things that on their face are shocking and offensive, often contradictory of things he's previously said. And if you take them literally, are just like, these are gross and unchristian things to say, and clearly false and clearly wrong. And when you call that out, you'll have 10,000 people being like, old man, you idiot, don't you know this is a joke?
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's a joke. I don't know if it's a joke for a couple of reasons. One, because the jokes all seem to be going in the same direction. So it's like the guy at work who's like, "Hey, wouldn't it be great if we went on a date?" I'm just kidding. Unless, and you're just like, I don't know that you're joking. I think you just are hiding behind the appearance of humor because you can't get away with just saying what you actually unironically believe. But let's grant that you're joking. Let's grant that everything is ironic. What is the unironic position that you're actually advocating for? And if you don't have one, if everything is a dang joke, if everything's irony, there's something spiritually toxic about that as well. There's a Flannery O'Connor short story. I'm blanking on the name of it, but it's the one where the little kid's he's raised by
the one where he is essentially
like the
baptized. The
kingdom of
guy
God.
with the
Yeah.
stick is chasing him. What is that called? Anyway.
He's searching for the kingdom of God because he goes with, I believe it's his grandma, and
Yep.
and she takes him
Yeah,
down to the
that's
river, and they're
right.
baptizing in the river, but the boy's own parents are non-believers.
Yep.
And so he hears this guy,
Is it the violent buried away? No. Gosh, it would
people
be
will
nice.
absolutely
All right.
get this right.
Tell us in the comments.
Yes.
Absolutely. We don't have ChatGPT at our disposal, right?
Right. I should have, whatever. Well, anyway, he's convicted by a couple of things. One, he hears this preacher talking about Jesus, and this is his first time realizing Jesus isn't just a word like damn, that it's an actual name for someone. And two, he is really drawn to the fact that this preacher believes things are real and serious. And this boy, even though he's like a young boy, has been living in a household where everything is a joke and
Yeah.
everything is ironic and everything is sarcastic.
That broke.
And the authenticity is what draws him.
I was just going to say the book broke my heart. It's a short story, but
Yeah.
it broke my heart. I mean, you remember that in the beginning, people should go read this book. The only problem is, do you have a phone on you by chance?
Yes.
Could you give me your phone?
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Maybe unlock it
Would you
before
like
you
Chat-
give me your phone.
ChatGPT?
No, you got to just Google or whatever. I'm going to find this. But that bit at the beginning, do you remember he wakes up and all the parents are hungover and still sleeping?
yeah.
And he's playing with cigarettes in an ashtray? Thank you so much.
Yes.
All right, now you keep talking. I will find this.
All right. Well, that's how I feel as someone who's just like, I want to have an earnest discussion. Because if somebody says, this person's pointing to real concerns that I have.
The river.
The river. There it is. We were totally wrong.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, there it is.
It's a heartbreaking story. I highly recommend
it. has a twist we're not even going to share.
No,
but
don't. Yeah. Thank you.
it's
Well, not just the twist, but I mean the innuendo at the end. Doesn't matter. Well, I'll tell you about that after.
all right. That sounds good. Well, rivers have twists. Anyway, that was an idiotic.
I didn't mean to derail you. Sorry. So
No,
he
no, no,
lives
no.
in a world where
He lives in
nothing
this
is
world in
serious.
which everything is just ironic and sarcastic and sardonic, and the internet can be like that. And whether we're talking about some of the Ortho-bros, and don't get me wrong, there are a lot of, especially Orthodox, who are really good faith, trying to share the truth, and maybe they just enjoy the sort of mocking approach. And a lot of young Catholics can be like that. I was 20 once, and someone who's like, oh, they're edgy and they're really pushing the envelope. That's really exciting, and it's really got this really, I don't know. There's something that can give you kind of a surge of adrenaline, like I can't believe they went there, and like the comedian or the commentator or whatever. But if that's always what you're doing, and you're just pushing the envelope for the sake of pushing the envelope, and you're pushing it in the same way every time, over and over and over again, I want to know what you earnestly, no pretenses, believe. Have the vulnerability to say, here are my beliefs, and here's what I actually unironically stand for, and then we can have a substantive conversation.
And you don't think the people who are constantly ironic are doing that in other situations? I mean,
I think they might be in other situations. I think with the Groyper stuff, you particularly see, like, it's very hard to critique any of the ism there, because it's very hard to know who is and isn't being serious. I saw earlier today disaffected followers of Fuentes who were mad about his position on Venezuela by saying that he was a gay Jew. And I have no idea.
What does that mean?
Thank you. Like, is this just saying me no like? Or are you saying you actually think he's homosexual? Do you think he's secretly Jewish? Like, what are we?
Yeah.
And without knowing what someone means, and particularly when it's just like in text and it's very vibey, that's just a bad way to do anything. Like, I would just say more broadly than just the irony thing, so much of the way that there's been a cheapening of intellectual discourse is where it's really vibes based. When you're using a lot of slang, when you're using a lot of like mimetic phrasing, that's usually a sign that you're not actually thinking deeply or independently about the things that you're passionate about. So when somebody says like, oh, get out of the internal longhouse in your mind, it's like, okay, you're just parroting a phrase someone else has given you. And it's loaded with all of these kind of implications, and no one outside of this small bubble of people even understands what the heck you're talking about right now. And so you're using a language that's now so jargony, so loaded, so everything else that I want to just say, let's stop and unpack. What do you think that means, and how do you and that can be productive if you can get people to that. It's hard to do online.
Yeah.
It's much easier to do just having a cup of coffee with somebody and just letting them explain, here are my frustrations, here are my fears, here are my thoughts.
Yeah.
And in a way that's much more vulnerable. But I
Yeah.
don't see a lot of vulnerability.
Yeah, I'll sometimes encounter people in real life, and they seem super sweet, and they'll say, "Hey, I was one of those people who said
Yeah.
all sorts of nasty things about you." I'm like, okay, well, yeah, I'm sorry. Okay, thanks, but I don't know why. In person, I don't encounter people acting like mad people.
I mean,
I'm sure there
I
are.
think there's a few things. One, when you're actually interacting with another human being, you are brought into a different, like, you're not going to speak in the harshest, most pejorative way. There's a lot of performance for the other
There's
people,
a
even in
lot
the
of
comments.
performance.
And you get a jolt off of it.
Yeah.
Oh, 1,000 people liked this mean reply I had.
It's almost like the way YouTube incentivizes creators,
Mm-hmm.
it also incentivizes commenters.
That's right.
And so you put out a video, you want that video to do well. YouTube gives you a dopamine hit by showing you how many views, how many thumbs up. Well, they needed to do the same thing. They needed to make a place where people would engage. And so since humility rarely goes viral, people are saying the most outlandish stuff to get thumbs up. And I don't know, I presume they go back to see, oh, look, I got 51 thumbs
Yeah,
up, and they
people
feel
reply.
good about that, I guess?
Well, especially if you can't create anything yourself. If you don't have anything, well, let me pause and say this. People in the comments say the meanest rumor you can about Matt Fradd. Just
No, do it.
gets more
They're
engagement.
already doing it.
It's good for the clicks.
No, better yet, the meanest thing you can say about me and Joe. Maybe not. I don't know.
That's going to go in a couple directions I'm not
Yeah.
totally comfortable with. I've already complimented your ankles. But in the unironic sense, I think there's a couple things to watch out for. One, there can be that kind of performance. And two, there's a strong correlation to how much time people are spending online
Oh, man.
and how much they're likely to do that. If you are successful in your real life and you're in a real community of other people that you interact with,
Your screen time is likely to be significantly lower.
and you're not doing this,
Yeah.
you're seeking validation online. Like the people who do this, the other thing, I'll just say this because I think you're too polite to say it. When you meet the people who are your critics, let me speak for you here.
All right.
Their criticism does not land because you're just like, oh, wow, the world's most awkward person said they thought I was an idiot. And that I'm doing something, like this person who has no qualifications, this person who in any other context
Yeah.
is likely to be bullied, is
That guy's
bullying me
profile
online.
picture was a Crusader knight.
Yeah, I can't believe that the
You're an
Crusaders are
anemic
letting
kid
people
from
in this
the
physical
Midwest.
condition.
Yeah.
The Crusaders don't have basic training, I guess. So yeah, like I didn't know armor came in that size. I'm making fat jokes, so I'm in a place where it's self-facing. But the point is, if you have an actual community of other people, you can have the much more vulnerable kind of discussion. And you can do that online, but it's much easier as a commenter to not say, hey, that was really convicting, or hey, I think you're wrong, but I think we're both seeking after God, or something. So I think we see a lot of that among young men. We see it at these incredible levels with the younger generation, but it's not unique to them. I've got some anecdotal stories that have been very helpful in shaping my thinking about this, because I have talked to people who were sharp critics of Catholicism and sharp critics of things that I was saying online. 'Cause I've been in the online space doing content since 2009. So I've seen generations by the digital standards. And I've had people who were atheists or Protestants who were often really strong in their critiques, who then quietly converted. And some of them converted to Catholicism.
Yeah. Trent just interviewed a Protestant fella he debated.
Yeah, that's right. Stephen Boyce, he's fantastic. Boyce was great as an Anglican. He's even better now that he's a Catholic. Boyce was never like he was never a troll. He was never somebody who was nasty about it. But even some of the people who were really heavily critical, sometimes that's the way you go through the objections yourself. And this is one thing I want to say, is to sort of balance out the fact that somebody is critical of Catholicism, the fact that somebody's critical of Christianity, the fact that somebody's critical of whatever it is you're saying. That doesn't mean they're a troll. It doesn't mean they're bad faith. hopefully they can express it as an actual critique rather than just a mock. But for some people, and I think this is true especially of men, that the way they work through the objection is by raising the strongest objection they can to it.
Thomas
Like,
Aquinas.
yeah, exactly. And so they hear you say the Eucharist is really Jesus, and they're going to fire back with really strongly worded things about why it's not. And internally, they might be actually entertaining your claim a little more than they're acknowledging. So I say that because I've seen it happen so many times where someone will say something publicly that's really sharp, and then I might even get an email from them that's a lot more nuanced and a lot more like,
That has happened to me.
yeah. So I don't want people to hear the earlier things we were saying about like people just mocking in bad faith, and it's very hard to have a fruitful discussion to say, therefore, I'm not going to do anything online because people are just going to be closed off to it. Sometimes they're more open to it than they seem. I just don't want to be part of the kind of bully gang up online stuff because
Oh, yeah.
it's exhausting and unfruitful in that sense.
Yeah, I agree. What role does irony and sarcasm play, if any, in apologetic battles?
There can be sometimes a need for a blunt sort of assessment of the thing. Like if you can show the absurdity of an idea by just saying, look, you think, I mean, for instance, if you're talking, let's say you're talking to a Protestant who believes in once saved, always saved. Somebody comes to the faith and they can't lose their salvation. There's different versions of this, perseverance of the saints, etc. They believe in that, but they also believe in the great apostasy. To just be like, okay, so nobody can lose their faith, but we all lost the faith. You just kind of laugh at it and then just point out the absurdity of believing those two things simultaneously. You can, but there's still substance behind the kind of laughter. But you have to be careful even with that stuff because it's easy for people to just get offended and to close off. And so again, circling back to the very beginning part of this, Mormons in particular, they've been made fun of so much that even when you come with
LDS, not Mormons.
yeah, excuse me, you're right, LDS. When you come even with good faith critiques, they have had so many bad faith critiques that proving that you're actually trying to engage in good faith,
Yeah.
even if you say things like Mormon instead of LDS or Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints,
Yeah.
that you have to show that you're trying to be a good faith interlocutor. And it's worth saying, you can't, even if you have a valid critique, people aren't going to receive it if you're a total jerk about it. And if the 10 people before you were total jerks about it as well.
It almost feels like the method is might makes right.
Yeah.
So I'm not accusing Ortho-bros of being unintelligent. They're clearly not. But and also the Catholic equivalent, the Protestant equivalent, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if there's an LDS equivalent. You'd have to tell me. They all seem pretty kind or nice.
I think it's a different thing that comes up.
It's a different
You can
thing.
find a sort of mocking that happens.
Definitely.
But
There's
I think that's not
veneer
the
of niceness to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen it occasionally in like LDS channels where they'll kind of make fun of the Trinity. They'll make fun of creedal Christianity as they call, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But
by might
they
makes
tend
right.
to
What
not
I
just
what I
jump
mean
in
is
and
I'm
make fun of
afraid that people are going into the online space, and it's like, well, these guys are loud and they make fun of everyone, so they're the cool guys, and so I'm going to join them.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're someone who is looking to be part of a cool thing, then the Ortho-bros or Nick Fuentes or any of these people, they have these groups that are fun and exciting because they're acting like the mean girls. And the mean girls are entertaining because they feel strong and powerful because they're being mean to other people. And there's something very psychologically attractive about that if you're someone who's a little weak. And so I just mentioned that.
Why is that? Why does it appeal to weak people?
Because they feel very vulnerable. And if they're part of a group that's attacking other people, they don't feel vulnerable anymore. And so it disproportionately, the online bullies are people who are not successful and, able to kind of defend themselves and their life individually, which is why they're joining in a pack.
Yeah.
And you saw this with some of the
Andrew Tate.
cancel culture.
Or
stuff.
Andrew Tate. You saw the
exactly.
young,
Like the guys who are drawn to that. Like I have zero desire to watch podcasts about alpha masculinity because like I'm a husband and father. This is all the masculinity I can take. Like, I'm not trying to be like a lady, but I don't need to be told by some other dude how he thinks I should live out my masculinity. Like, what are you talking about?
Did you see that video clip between Andrew Wilson and that guy dressed in white on that panel?
I don't think so.
It's exactly what you're saying, because you've got this ginormous guy trying to make fun of Andrew Wilson in the most internet bro way possible, and it just wasn't landing at all. And Andrew was just like intellectually like disabling him here and there and everywhere. And I don't know, I think if I was in the crowd watching it, the feeling was, wow, this big bald guy, I got to show it to you after. This big
Yeah.
bald guy is clearly winning, but he definitely didn't win. The poor guy, and he did seem like a very insecure fella.
Yeah.
I mean, could crush both of our heads with 2 fingers for sure, but seemed like God love him. I'm sure, who knows what's going on in his life, but
I
a pretty
mean, look,
insecure fella.
there is this quest for manhood that is built into us, and we don't have rites of passage to enter into manhood. So you don't have anything like a bar mitzvah. You don't have anything like a...
Speak for yourself.
Touche.
You're welcome. I don't even know what a bar mitzvah is still.
It's not that.
Okay.
But you have historically these rites of passage that different cultures do. I think I mentioned this maybe in the last time we spoke. Sebastian Junger, who is the director of the movie Restrepo, he was embedded with the troops in the Donegal Valley. And so he's in the Valley of Death in Afghanistan. And he's talking to the guys there, like why they signed up without a draft to go to Afghanistan. And there were, all sorts of reasons, patriotism, response to 9/11, et cetera. But one of the recurring themes that he was really struck by was how many men were, or like boys, were wanting to become men and they didn't know how to. And were being actively discouraged from asking how to become men. And so I think you have some of that online. Like this stuff isn't coming out of nowhere.
Yeah, no, totally. I actually was talking to a good friend of mine recently. I'm not sure if you've heard of him. He's got a great YouTube channel. People should check it out. Mike Pansile. So you look at Mike. Mike's a muscular dude, and he speaks about masculinity and patriarchy and against feminism. Okay, but he does it in a humble way.
Yeah.
And I was talking to him about this recently. I was saying that maybe our desire to reclaim masculinity is a little bit like Catholics born after the revolutions of Vatican II. I'm not talking about Vatican II in a bad way. I'm just talking about what took place after, right? Like Catholics like myself, I mean, we didn't know what incense was. I didn't know what rosary beads were, except that my grandma had them. I knew that, but I thought it might be a necklace. I wasn't sure, right? And so now you have Catholics who weren't raised with this stuff awkwardly, because how else could you do it?
Yeah.
Trying to appropriate it again because it was taken from you, and now you're trying to, how do I integrate this into my life? There's an awkwardness to that.
Yeah, that's right.
And there should be an awkwardness to it. It's an awkward thing to have to do, but it's a worthwhile thing to do. It's something similar, I think, with being born into a world where men are constantly being made fun of, the Homer Simpson stereotype. And now you've got men who are trying to go, okay, hang on. No, I want to be a man and I want women to act like women. Okay. There's going to be a lot of awkwardness there as well. But I think one of the dangers in that Catholic sense is now you may have Catholics online telling other Catholics, unless you do X, Y, and Z, you're not a good Catholic.
Right.
When the church hasn't said as much. And that can cause a lot of damage. And I think likewise in the broasphere, okay, you can have, and see what often happens in the Catholic sphere is a Catholic finds a particular devotion that legitimately helps him. And it might be the Holy Rosary, it might be this particular book from this particular saint. And then they start pushing that on everybody and kind of talk like, unless you're reading this private revelation from so-and-so, you're really not with it, right? That can actually do damage to people's faith. And I think likewise in the broasphere, you may have found some particular thing that worked really well with your wife and your children and the way you discipline them. And then you tell everybody to act exactly as you act, but you don't know who you're talking to. And men and women are different, obviously, but individual men.
Yes.
Like your temperament is very different to my temperament, and I imagine your wife, even though you said she's an extrovert, as is my wife, is very different to her.
My wife's an introvert.
Okay.
My wife's much more like you. I'm much more like your wife.
Okay, so she's superior.
But again, not in a weird way.
Yeah, good. Yeah, again, make fun of us in the comments section. But do you see what I mean? So once you take a particular thing that works and then you make it an infallible like litmus test for whether or not you're a man, I think what we're going to see is a lot of damage being done to Catholic families because of things that bros online are saying when they didn't intend to do anything bad, but I think they end up will doing it, which is why humility is really essential and gentleness. Anyway, what do you think about
I think that's absolutely dead on correct. I would add that this is also a problem within female circles as well. Mothers do this to each other all the time.
Yeah, how so?
This is the parenting technique that worked for me, so this is going to work for your kids. And these moms just horribly ripping each other down.
Co-sleeping or cloth diapers.
Right. All this stuff is like, if you're not doing it this way, do you even love your kids? And Discipline is like this. Discipline's a huge one because what works for one kid often doesn't work for the next one.
100%.
Like our kids, we've got 3
100.
kids, and the techniques that work for one of them, the ones that work for like my 4-year-old son would not work at all for my 6-year-old daughter. And our 2-year-old is radically different. So everyone's so individual. So trying to give a one-size-fits-all thing based on your experience of a small sample size is almost always unhelpful.
All right, everyone, I want to tell you about Bible Across America, which is an inspiring initiative from the St. Paul Center. It represents an unprecedented opportunity to unite the entire church through the world's, listen to this, the world's largest Bible study. This transformative program invites believers to embark on a spiritual journey alongside thousands of fellow individuals and groups from across the globe, creating a powerful sense of communion that transcends geographical boundaries. As participants delve deeply into Scripture together, they will discover new dimensions of knowledge and cultivate a more profound love for our Lord Jesus Christ. The experience goes beyond mere academic study, offering participants the chance to encounter Christ in a personal and meaningful way through both the sacred Scripture and the vibrant community of fellow seekers. Through this dual approach of Scripture engagement and communal learning, participants will find themselves increasingly equipped and empowered to share their faith with confidence and authenticity, becoming effective witnesses to others in their own lives and communities. You know, I've had Dr. Scott Hahn, Dr. Bergsma, wonderful Bible teachers here on Pints with Aquinas, and I couldn't recommend the work that they're doing there highly enough. So, transform your journey this year. Join the movement alongside a global community starting February 18th. Don't miss out. Sign up today at stpaulcenter.com/pints.
And so here's the difference. You can say, this worked for me, it might work for you. Whether you're talking about parenting, whether you're talking about masculinity, whether you're talking about spirituality, whatever it is. But if you start saying, this worked for me, therefore it has to work for you,
and
you've
if
gone
you're
too
not
far.
doing it,
Yeah,
you're not a Catholic, a good man, a successful woman, whatever.
exactly. So in Catholic terms, we would just say, don't bind what the church loosens. If the church gives someone latitude, don't you impose your own private strictures.
Amen. It's like the church is so much more open-minded than us.
Right. And so, there's sometimes this question of like, well, how strict should we be on stuff? If you want to be strict on yourself, be strict on yourself.
Yeah.
If the church has imposed strictness, follow that.
Yeah.
But otherwise,
Yeah.
let other people live this thing out in a different way.
If the church is not demanding that we go to Holy Mass every day, which she hasn't, then you shouldn't be doing that.
Right. If you want to do that for yourself, that's fantastic.
Yeah, and if you
That's
can
a way
talk
of
about the
serving-
benefits that you've got from it and what others might go, why it's a good thing, sure. This is Jimmy's really good at this.
He
right?
is very good.
He makes this distinction between what does the church forbid, permit, encourage, demand. You really got to get those right.
That's right.
Yeah.
And the church is very careful about that. Where we might say, well, this bar is too low. Why, this should be a holy day of obligation. This should be whatever else. We might say, why is Mother Church not being tougher with her kids? Although I think she's being sensitive to the fact that different kids are in different places. And maybe she should be tougher. That's not your job to figure out. You can then say, well, I'm going to go to Mass whether I'm required to or not. And here's the good part. These things you're doing voluntarily are worth more than the things you're just doing because you're forced to do them. So the fact that you think this is really good and this is something you've voluntarily taken up as a penance, as spiritual reading, as a devotional practice, as whatever, that's pleasing to God. The minute you start trying to impose that on your neighbor like a Pharisee, that's not pleasing to God. And if your neighbor is guilted into doing it, that's not as worthwhile than if they just did the things that they're trying to do for God's sake out of the goodness of their heart, out of the promptings of the Holy Spirit. So I'd say that, like, you're actually depriving your Christian brother or sister of the ability to give proper service to God. And 2, there are as many different kinds of saints as there are saints. I like to give the example of within France. You just take the category of female French saints, and you've got Therese, you've got Joan of Arc. And Therese dresses up as Joan of Arc. There's a famous picture of this.
Yeah.
And it's funny because they're such different saints.
Yeah.
And so imposing like one model of what a saint looks like.
And how sad if Therese thought that in order to be holy, she had to be exactly like Joan of Arc.
Exactly. And
they're both the patron saints of France, we should say.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
And
And she's the patron saint of missionaries and never left her
Exactly.
convent.
right. She and Francis Xavier, who are living these
Mhm.
radically different lives, and they're called to live these radical different lives. The beginning of Introduction to the Devout Life by St. Francis de Sales is fantastic in this regard. He talks about how absurd it would be if a bishop decided to live in silence like a monk, or if the parent decides to live like the Benedictine, and they're like, I'm gonna sleep for 8 hours and work for 8 hours and pray for 8 hours, and it's like not gonna parent at all, not gonna like these things don't work at all. The different people are called to different forms of holiness, and it's all the same holiness. And this is not even a point we can dispute. There's one body, and there's many parts of the body. And so for the eyes to say, hey, this works really good for me as an eye, so I'm going to impose it on you ears, is just black and white what you're not supposed to
Then
be
the
doing.
ear feels like a failure because it can see nothing.
Right. And so people have different gifts and different quantities of gifts. Someone might actually be more talented than you, and they might be talented than you in a different way.
Yeah.
And if your idea of what your holiness looks like is imitating them,
Yes.
you're going to be a cheap knockoff rather than the authentic version of the saint God makes you to be.
Yeah, I just hear our Lord's, come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. That's
And this is true of masculinity as well. Like there's so many different ways of living up masculinity. I'm going to give free dating advice
Oh,
to
come
everyone
on.
listening.
All right.
One of the common complaints that men have is they don't know what women want. And there's one thing that, in my experience, almost every woman will say that she wants.
Okay.
She wants a man to be strong. But
Okay.
herein lies the rub. The kind of strength a woman is looking for is going to be very particular, based on her own fears, her own anxieties, her own upbringing, the men in her life, her own gifts and talents. And so some women want to be protected from physical danger. They want a really buff man. They want a man who they know he can protect me if an intruder breaks in the house. Other women are saying, we lived, maybe my dad was really physically strong, but we lived in dire poverty because he couldn't hold a job for more than 6 weeks. And so they want a man who's got a different kind of strength, a responsibility. Maybe it's financial success. Maybe it's just like a certain approach towards work. There's as many different flavors of strength. And what is the word for strength? Virtus, manliness. This is going to be particular to the man. And what the woman is looking for is particular to her. And so some of this is just finding the right lids for the right pots. That not every woman wants a super buff gym bro. And it's weird because women keep saying this online, and dudes online are like, no, trust us, you do. And it's like, they really don't. I mean,
8% body fat. Yeah.
exactly. Like, I'm married, guys. You clearly don't have to follow that blueprint.
That is so funny. Trust us, you do. What do you know, women? This is why you shouldn't vote. You don't even know what you want. You don't know. We will tell you what we...
Exactly. So it's weird because
my.
there's a culture of just dudes complimenting other dudes for how manly they are in a way that is deeply unattractive to real life women.
Let me give you I've shared this before, but I used to have a beard. I don't know if you remember. My wife didn't like it, but my dear man friends loved it. Like
Exactly.
my mate John Henry Span's like, dude, you look fantastic. My wife has really sensitive Irish skin.
Yeah.
And so if I try to kiss her with any kind of stubble, she can't help but recoil, even though I'm very attractive. I couldn't tell if I wanted John Henry's respect or my wife's kisses. It took me about 4 weeks to decide.
This is the most questionable thing you've ever said.
Again, in the comments section, go nuts.
Yeah. But no, this is exactly what it is, where they will make fun of guys for being, wife guys, where guys are just like obsessed with their wives. And it's like, look, what are you living
this
out
is the
this
oth-
kind-
yeah, this is the other thing. Like, you shouldn't be friends with your wife. I'm like, well, I'm sorry. I really like her. So what do you want me to do?
Exactly.
You know, like, and also explain what you mean by that. Because if you explain what you mean by that, maybe I'll agree with you. But just to throw it out there, like, this is the new bro thing we have to submit to. I'm like, oh, sorry, honey, we can't be friends.
I mean, if charity is maximal friendship, and if you're to have charity towards your wife, then it sure seems like you should be.
Now, Father Moses, who you've critiqued, and I think it was an excellent video. I actually have a lot of respect for Father Moses for two reasons. I once went after somebody on Twitter. So I was off Twitter forever. I got on and within like 2 days said something stupid. And that's why I'm not on it anymore. Father Moses texts me. He's like, dude, what are you doing? And I made excuses. There's a knee-jerk reaction, as we all do. But he came to me privately. I thought about it, prayed about it. It hurts so much to realize he was right. So I apologized to the individual, right? So that's why I thought it was great that he did that. Secondly, he has this excellent video when he says men shouldn't be best friends with their wives. I clicked on it hoping to hate it.
Mm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah,
You're like,
yeah.
I can't wait to write this guy off. No, what he said was excellent. Like what he was saying is not that we shouldn't be friends with our wives, but that, look, as the man of the house, right, you want to take the burden for your family and for
Yeah.
your wife, right? You don't want to come and dump stuff
Oh,
on
yeah.
her continually.
Right.
That's what Joe Heschmeyer's for. So you and I will go out for a drink and maybe I'll share with you in confidence the stuff that's really bothering me, like my stress with finances or my stress with this child or that. And it's not that you can't do that with your wife, but you do want to be a source of strength in the home. So when he explained it, I'm like,
Yeah.
I get it.
No,
That
I
makes
agree with
sense.
him there.
Yeah.
I do. And actually, I responded to particular arguments he made against Catholicism.
Right.
I'm no great expert on Father Moses. And I want to say that in fairness to him, because I'm not just saying, I've watched all this guy's stuff. I was like, I've watched the stuff I could find he'd said on Catholicism. Those arguments were not very good. He might have.
It was a good response.
I saw a lot of people who've been tremendously benefited by him. And I want to respect that. And I think that's absolutely right. Like if he's privately counseling you, that is what a priest should be doing. Like giving you good spiritual guidance and encouragement. And I think he's right as well that if you are taking out all of your frustration and stress on your wife, even in the sense of just dumping it all on her, some women are going to want to just be like, oh, tell me everything. But if you've been with the kids all day and the house has been like on the verge of burning down all day,
as it is now while you're here in Nashville.
Oh my God.
It's right.
My wife, she's incredible in this way. She will occasionally tell me when things are going sideways, but she always just lets me think things are going well at home. And then half the time they are. And then half the time she's like, oh yeah, also this happened. And so, but she saves it up so that she's not like burdening me with stuff I have no control over at the time, which is wonderful. And it's a lot to ask of her. Like she has to, when I'm on the road, when I'm doing this kind of stuff, she's got 3 small children at home who are figuring out exactly what boundaries look like when I'm not there to help enforce them. And they have very aggressive, God-given personalities that can be great and can also mean like there's a lot of pushing, just a lot of, I heard you tell me 10 times I couldn't do it, but what about the 11th time? So that kind of stuff. So yeah, I think it's really good to have that sense of what can your wife handle right now? What is good kind of vulnerability of just sharing, and what is just a burden you shouldn't be placing on her because she's already got so much on her plate. And a lot of that is going to be negotiated in the particulars of a marriage.
What's something your marriage has taught you? How long have you been married, first of all?
I've been married for 7 years, going on 8 years. Yeah, I've been taught a lot. So my wife is a marriage and family therapist. So yes, yeah.
What's that like?
Well, it's really unfair because I'm good at winning arguments usually, but when someone can sit back and be like, you feel that way, it's like, feel is not even a word in my vocabulary. Like, what are you doing? This isn't fair. No, it's great. My wife is brilliant, and it's something she was funny and smart and beautiful, and those things, and someone who very obviously was pursuing the good of God over everything else. And so those were things that really drew me to her, first as a friend, and then as a person I would want to spend the rest of my life with. One thing that I've learned is the stuff that you're worried about is not usually the stuff you have to be worried about. Like before we got married, we used to play this game of just like disaster planning. Like, hey, if we get married and 5 years down the road, this happens, what are you going to do? And this was like a game we played, but also sort of like...
Sounds very stressful.
Oh yeah. It's just like plotting out every disastrous scenario in marriage. And then like the stresses in the early days of our marriage were not on any of those things. It was just much more of just like, I don't know what we should be doing in this concrete situation, or, should she be working? Should she work at all? She's a marriage and family therapist. She can set her own hours. Should she do that? Should she not? Like we had to negotiate all of that stuff and figure that stuff out. And it's not always just cut and dry. And it's not always really simple. And I know it's very easy for people online to be like, here's what the right answer is. You have no idea what you're talking about. And we had no idea until we actually got to a lot of those things. You can stress about it. You should make sure you're on the same page in general. You should have the same principles. You should have the same values.
Yeah.
You should both be seeking after the Lord. And if you have all of those things and you know how to converse and argue charitably, I think you'll be fine. But that was all, I guess another thing is, in a debate, you can just show like, here are 20 reasons why you're an idiot and you're wrong. You can't do that in
You
marriage. Yeah, I guess you can, but it'll be a hollow victory. So learning how to engage with her and seeing all of the ways that like, okay, this thing that would convince me won't convince her,
Mm.
and vice versa. Uh, here's an example. Like I can think of a clear one in the other way around. I want incredible levels of bluntness. Like many years ago, back when I was in college, I was pursuing a young woman. This is not my wife. This is a long time ago. And she made a list of 22 reasons she would never date me.
Oh my.
And I asked if I could have a copy of it.
Tell me what some of them were.
I'm just like ways that I was kind of a jerk and like
Fake
all
and
these-
gay. Come on,
No,
that's not
yeah,
a
exactly,
reason.
no. So I just remember looking at the list and being like, okay, well, I can fix these ones, and I think I can get her past these ones because if she's making a list, it's obviously entered her mind that like this is a, and so we ended up dating for like 2 years. But like I have no problem receiving criticism. I have no problem with someone just being like, here's 22 reasons, and I want to know. Like if someone's got a beef or frustration with me, I would much rather them just tell me to my face, here's everything I think you're doing that's wrong. And I can either say, you're absolutely right about that. I need to change that. Or I can say, I disagree, and here's why I disagree. And we can have a spirited conversation. It would crush my wife. If I did that to my wife and said, here's all the ways I think you're failing as a wife and mother, that would be devastating to her. And so her wiring is much more like, I will kind of, in the general direction, sort of lay something out. If he wants to intuit what this means, he can. And she's very gentle with it, but I'm oblivious. So I will just miss a cue. So we've had to kind of meet each other's styles of conflict, of directness, of all of this stuff, because both of us are meaning to be charitable. But I need to be really good at saying, here are all these things that you're doing that are really good. Here's one thing you might think about doing differently. And that's going to go a lot further than here are all of these critiques in list form for your future reference.
My wife and I have been married 20 years this year, and I would say about 4 years ago, I figured out something about her. Isn't that bananas? You would think that even after a year, you go, I understand you. And here's what it was. My wife is perfectly willing going along with what I want to do. She just needs to understand it.
Yeah.
And I took her continual, but what about, as just like, what are you doing? Why are you being like belligerent or like objecting to me? Right. Submit, woman. And what I would find is she really wasn't trying to be like that. She's just asking questions. And when I would go, well, here's why. She's like, oh, okay.
Yeah, that's right.
17 years it took me.
I relate to that. My wife, she's not wired the same way your wife is. From my conversations with both of these women, I can say that. But I think in general, overwhelmingly, women, particularly Christian women, want their husbands to lead, but they also want to have some kind of assurance that they're not just blindly trusting someone who seems to be making, like
if my wife led me, if she allowed me to lead us financially, we would be destitute. Please, I know that's my fault. I shouldn't be leading in a wrong way, but I hope that she would push back if I was like...
Yeah, this is one of the things that came up this past fall, this debate of what does it look like for male headship? And if you actually read Cass v. Kanubi, it's very clear that like the men should lead and the women should submit. This is a document by Pius XI, but that this isn't the submission of like a child to a parent. Because with a child, you don't assume they have anything thoughtful to add. Like you don't need kids to be like, well, here's how I'd run the finances, Dad. Because like you're a child, you've got nothing to add to this conversation. That's not how husband and wife should work. But also, this is very much particular to the unique skills. So if one of you is really good with numbers and one of you is really good at like keeping the budget, they should probably be the one to do that. And this is in every area. Like a bishop who thought that the only way he could run his diocese was to do everything himself would be leading a disastrous diocese. A head of a company who thought the only way to run things was to do everything himself, it'd be a disaster. Said, oh, don't do anything in the company without getting it approved by me. That kind of micromanaging is a terrible method of leadership in every context, including the family. So these guys who are like, oh, my wife can't buy anything without running it by me first. It's like, that sounds horrible. I don't want any of that. That's not how Christian leadership works. That's not how any leadership works. Like the model of leadership we're given in Luke 22 is that the one who leads should be as a servant. And this model isn't everyone clear all of your expense reports with your husband. Like that's insanity. And so recognizing what are the gifts and talents of each individual. This is why it has to be negotiated and lived out in a marriage and not online. Like, you don't go to your bros on Twitter and say, "Oh, hey, my wife and I are disagreeing. Who's right?" Like, you could ask Rock. It's not going to go well. It's just going to tell you you're right. But you figure out, like, what are the gifts and talents God has given each of us? What are our fears? What are our desires? What are the ways God's calling us? And then you can chart a course. And if you do that collaboratively, and then you chart that course, I can almost guarantee your wife will be happy to go along with that.
Mm. So you gave some dating advice earlier about strength. I am increasingly reluctant to give any advice because the Zoomers keep telling me that I don't know what I'm talking about, and I believe them,
Mhm.
actually. I mean, when I started dating my wife, phones weren't a thing, you know. Well, I mean, they were a thing, they just weren't computers. We had MSN Messenger. Sometimes I would wait till she was up and we would go back and forth, but it was such a different world back then.
It's true.
What are you seeing, and do you think you have anything to add to the
Yeah.
Zoomers who are watching and want to get married?
So
or-
right, when I'm speaking in the general way of just like strength. Figure out, like, cultivate your strengths and find someone who desires those strengths. Work on the areas you have weaknesses, particularly moral weaknesses, but also areas where you have major interpersonal flaws. That is cross-culturally, cross-technology, just good generic advice. Where things get particular, it involves a lot of the technological hurdles. So there's a few things. Have we talked about Barry Schwartz and the paradox of choice?
I don't know.
Okay. Well, Schwartz wrote a book
Oh,
called
yes.
The Paradox
I
of
think
Choice.
you did
Okay.
talk about that
We
last
just
time.
talked about, like, the more choices you have,
Yeah.
the more you can have kind of a paralysis.
Of course.
It's because that's right. I mentioned how much I hate the Cheesecake Factory menu.
Yep.
Well, this is how dating works. They actually did studies on speed dating that found that women would often have thoughtful kind of things that they were looking for in men. And if you're going on a date with one guy, you have a chance to find out whether he matches your criteria. But if you're speed dating a room of 20 guys and you need some sorting mechanism, it's going to be something superficial because you need a sorting mechanism. And it's not going to be, here's the value. It's going to be, well, this guy's tallest and he's the most handsome or whatever. And so women were making more superficial decisions because they needed some interior mechanism to determine which guy was most worthy of investing the time with. Because you just can't give that level of analysis to each individual guy if you're in an arena full of men. The internet is an arena full of men and an arena full of women beyond our wildest imagination. And it's encouraging us algorithmically, just because our brains can't comprehend the amount of data that's at our fingertips. It's encouraging us to make more superficial, split-second decisions. So you start having the women who just say, I'm going to only date men who are over 6 feet tall. And it's like, you've just narrowed down, a huge portion of the dating pool. I'm only going to date men who make this much money or whatever. And so those kind of superficial decisions are partly a survival mechanism for being overwhelmed by information, but they are making the dating culture abhorrently toxic. I mean, no one individual is making those decisions, but people are just failing to be connected. We were talking about putting the right lid on the right pot. Those connections aren't happening very well if you've got the world of pots before you and the world of lids before you, and you just feel completely overwhelmed. And so I see the problems, and it's hard to give good solutions to it. Now, that's just one problem. Another problem is if you're spending 8 hours a day on Twitter.
Does anyone really? I know you're being hyperbolic. Do people?
I don't think
do
I'm
people
being
do that?
Yes. You look at the screen time averages and see how people are using their time. Like, there are some people where if you criticize them online, you can guarantee you're going to get a response very quickly. And you're just like, why are you on your phone right now? Like, why are you looking at Twitter this minute? That sort of, like, we mentioned the Alex Soren thing before. A lot of the Orthodox bros just could not fathom that I had not watched this debate the day it came out, when I'd come back from a trip and was sick and was, like, with my kids who I hadn't seen in days. And, like, they couldn't fathom I wasn't watching a 3-hour debate in the middle of the night. And they just literally thought I was lying about this. And it was just fascinating to be like, we live in such different worlds right now. And overwhelmingly, like, these guys don't have wives and kids. They don't. And if they did, they would wonder how they ever had time to watch this much stuff online. But that kind of stuff is malignant to your personality. Like, the people who speak like the internet and who it's just super obvious when you talk to them, like, they spend a lot of time in front of a screen. There is a need to touch grass, as the kids say, and to go outside. And I say that as a person who frankly spends too much time online myself, who has to be online a lot for work, that if you aren't careful about balancing that by spending time with other human beings in a context where your phone is away, you're missing a real opportunity of just growing interpersonally as a human. Like, you learn more from just doing that than you can learn. You can't learn some of those skills online.
Mm.
And those skills are really important to learn when you do things like dating. Here's a common issue I see. Some guys will peacock in dating, meaning, a peacock, he shows off his magnificent feathers, and peahens are able to just be gray, but peacocks have to have all these beautiful colors. And so he'll want to show how cool he is. Look at all my accomplishments. Look at all the stuff that I do. And he's expecting her to come away being like, wow, that guy is so impressive. And how does she actually respond?
I don't know. Depends.
She's underimpressed usually because she didn't get a word in edgewise. This guy just bragged about how amazing he was the whole time. And that's one of the things you want to show rather than tell. Like, be a good listener. Ask her about her own life. If you get asked something, by all means, share about it. But be good at asking questions, listen to the questions. Like, what you do is something of a unique skill set. Like, you are good at asking good, probing questions.
Okay.
Most of us are not good at that. And it's something that has to be learned, and it's hard to learn if you're just a consumer of content online, or if you're in this mode of like, I need to impress you by just showing you all this cool stuff I can do. That's a very that's a very common thing people fall into. But as long as we're giving like dating advice from a guy who's now 40, I would say if you're trying to impress her instead of showing her that you're a good listener, that you're probably making a misstep. And women, jump in the comments and tell me if this is right or wrong, and then tell me the most embarrassing thing about Matt.
Any advice for women?
I would say a couple things. One, there can be this unrealistic set of criteria.
Like, you have to be a well-fed Dutchman.
Yeah, right.
6 foot.
Yeah,
6.
exactly.
Yeah.
And those men might exist, but those men are also being pursued by a bunch of other women. And so having a sense of like, what are the actual non-negotiable things and what aren't is important.
Well, do you know what's interesting though? I mean, when you and I lived before the internet and we were dating, I don't know if you ever had this experience, but you might meet a woman and you don't initially feel attracted to her.
Yeah.
You might objectively acknowledge that she's beautiful, but there's a lot of beautiful women. I mean, but then you get to know her and her personality shines through and you go, oh my gosh, like there's something here, like,
Can I embarrass my wife a little bit? I'm sure we'll find out if she watches the episode or not.
Well, if she's in the comments ragging on me, then we know she has.
Simone Riscala, who I don't know if you've ever had her on the show or not, but she's great. She does a lot of fantastic work. As she introduced me to my wife, not as like someone I would ever want to date, but she just like shared a funny story from my wife. And I was actually a seminarian at the time. She had just gotten out of an engagement. So neither of us was remotely on the dating scene, and we were just friends and in a pretty casual way where we were part of like a group chat online. And my wife had taken, I'll just conservatively say, one of the worst pictures of her life as her profile picture. So I was convinced I was not attracted to her. And so she seemed very safe. It was not a flattering shot. She always claims I'm exaggerating with this, but like,
right up the nostrils.
Yeah, it was just she was like, the angle is like, she criticizes the pictures I take of her, and I'm just like, I don't know, babe. I've seen the ones you've taken of yourself, and so she's beautiful in real life. I didn't know this because I hadn't seen her in person. So I got to know her just at a personal level.
Which is the opposite of most people's experience.
Right.
Most people you meet in real life go, there's no way that's you. How is that you?
Exactly. Or you think they're really attractive, and then you find their personality and you're like, not for me. So I was friends with my wife, and then I don't know, it was probably months later, they posted some pictures. And I was like, who is that? And I realized it was Anna, and was like, oh, I've got to be a lot more careful around this woman, because turns out she's actually very attractive. So that sort of thing of, what you were describing, of sometimes you'll get to know a person and then you can sort of see the chemistry, like, oh, okay.
But this is what you may not get the chance to do if we're only dating online. And I'm not
if
saying
we met
you
on
shouldn't.
Tinder or something and she'd posted that picture, I would not have swiped whichever way you're supposed to swipe.
And I'm certainly not putting down these dating apps. I'm sure they're terrific. Catholic Match is a great one, and there's other excellent ones. Emily Wilson and her husband have put something together. So I'm really glad that because I had something not similar, but when I met my wife, we became really good friends.
Yeah.
And I found her funny. I didn't find a lot of women funny, but I found her really funny, and I liked that. And she had a lot of admirable qualities. And I remember fearing that I wanted that because she came to visit me in Australia, and we were both afraid that there wouldn't be a spark,
Yeah.
but that we both wished there were because we were so close.
Yeah.
You see?
Yeah, absolutely.
Turned out there was a spark, but 20 years later, thank God.
Yeah, I think that like finding someone who you can and
So how do you do that except in having in real person relationships?
that's a really good question. That's a very good question. I don't know what to counsel. I mean, in the case of my wife, I did get to know her largely online before I ever knew her in person. And in a way where we weren't like online dating. We were just part of like a group chat and she'd say something funny or thoughtful or whatever. We were doing a Marian consecration together as a group. And like, you get to see someone in those kind of contexts. So that can happen online. But that's so particular that I can't be like, oh, go join a WhatsApp group on Marian consecration and maybe you'll see someone else who, and if people start going to consecration groups for that reason, it might be ruining the consecration groups.
Yeah.
So yeah, it can be hard to find the spaces right now
Yeah.
to get to know someone in a vulnerable, thoughtful way where you get to know their character. Because everyone is performing online and everyone is maybe a different person online than offline. Those are hard things. I think the people who are frustrated with the dating scene right now have every right to be because it is a bad scene. And it's not clear exactly what we do to get out of it, but it is clear that there are real problems with it. And we haven't even talked about things like the distorting effects of pornography, of both corrupting men and also giving them a false sense of what women are looking for in men because it's a false vision of female sexuality, or women who are reading, like, frankly, pornographic books that are doing sort of a similar thing, presenting these imaginary men that real men are not going to compare to, or just presenting men in a way that isn't true to life, and that maybe a woman wouldn't really want a man to act like that in real life. That those things can have this incredible distorting effect on top of. But even if you don't have it, even if you're not struggling with pornography, even if that's not the issue you have, you still have, this is a really bad medium in which to get to know someone at the level I need to know them to know whether I could spend the rest of my life with them or not.
I never thought we'd get into dating advice in this interview. That's why I love chatting with you, Joe. My mate Nick Stumphauser created something called shiftyourphone.com. I'm not getting paid to promote it or anything like that, but I use it, and it's the only thing that works. You may have heard of Brick or the app Opal. They don't work. It's so easy to get around. I tried getting the dumb phone and then just found, I used it for a long time, but just found it was really difficult to live and travel. This is the best thing I've found. I was in Florida a few days ago, came up here for a week. I shifted my phone, that's what you say, so it removes all distracting apps. Do you know about it?
I know the basic model. I know about
So
Brick and
you
Brick.
have Uber, you have Delta, you have Gmail,
Yeah.
I have Slack for work, I have WhatsApp, I chat with my brother and sister, So you have just enough, but there's zero way to get to a browser. There's no distracting apps, no YouTube, no anything, right? The point is, I have to impose that upon myself in order to live well. Because if I had have brought my computer, like this trip, I've already read a bunch of Crime and Punishment again.
Yeah.
Right? I've read it before, reading it again. Why? Well, because I need something to do and I can't just like waste my life away. So I really do think that to get in control of your screen time, I mean, ideally, it'd be great if you could get to a point where you just had the willpower. But obviously, these apps, they hack our willpower, and they're often more powerful than we are at putting it at arm's length. And so whether it's shiftyourphone.com or something else, I think we have to put our phone in its place. I read a lot of St. Isaac the Syrian these days. Every day.
Nice.
I read just one page a day. That's it, of his ascetical homilies, not more, because they're so dense, right? I'm reading his 5th homily right now, and he talks about the importance of distancing ourselves from the world. And I think the temptation is often we read it and we go, okay, but he's talking to monks. If he knew about my life, he'd have nothing to say. Therefore, I have nothing to glean from his wisdom. But it's like, okay, well, maybe he meant go live in a hole in the desert somewhere. But like, how could I apply that to my life?
Right.
And, another thing he talks about along the same lines is imagine yourself as an enclosed city. And he talks about barring the gates so that you're only now fighting the inner man, right?
Yeah.
Or, because we're being attacked and dragged away from our internal communion with the Lord very often. And so, like, one of the ways you could bar the gates, if not perfectly, is at least by diminishing your screen time. So how has this been true in your life? Or
Yeah, when I was in Italy, I didn't have a phone plan. So I had access to the internet when I was connected to Wi-Fi.
in bathrooms, in cafes.
Right.
Yeah.
And I would walk
Yeah.
from seminary to class, and it was like 2 miles. So I'd have 40 minutes each way, where even if I wanted to use the internet, I just physically couldn't. I mean, I guess I could have gone into a cafe and
Mhm.
tried to get connected to the Wi-Fi. And at that point, you're just like, it's 20 more minutes till I just get back to but it forces this time of quiet, or of being, like I could record a WhatsApp message and it would send when I got to wherever I was going. So I could, formulate a response and then see 40 minutes later what the person had said when they got it. But it forces those times away from the devices. And I'm someone who, that's a struggle. Just
Well, how do you do it today? Or do you not need to? It's entirely possible you have just more self-control
I
than
have
me.
things like just app timers.
Okay.
So that if I'm spending too long, that it'll cut me off then. But I've had to do things like I believe it was Advent. I just turned off any mobile games or anything, because sometimes you're on a plane and you're wanting to listen to something and fiddle with something with your hands, and you've got nothing to do. You could read a book. I've been listening to Thomas Madden's lectures.
He's going to be in studio very soon.
He's fantastic. I got a quick Madden story as an aside. I took one of his classes on the Crusades, I believe. No, it was maybe medieval papacy, maybe the Crusades. Whatever the case was, we were talking about the Fourth Crusade, and he was talking about the Doge of Venice, who was like the leader of Venice at the time when it was a city-state. And there was a story about how he'd been blinded as a boy in Constantinople. And I'd heard this story and I didn't know if it was true or not. And I go to raise my hand and I'm like, he hasn't mentioned that. And I don't even know if this is a thing I just heard from one guy or if it's true or not. And it turned out it was a popular myth that had been debunked by one Thomas Madden. So I gotta look it up. And it was just like, oh, this is literally the guy who wrote the book on the Doge of Venice. And he debunked this myth and everything. So it's like, I need to just shut up and pay attention. That was a great example of where I was starting to get distracted by reading online stuff that was relevant to the course. But you go on Wikipedia to see one thing and you
Yeah.
figure, how did I end up on this thing 5 pages later? To just realize, no, I'm sitting at the feet of a real master of his craft. I need to just listen to what this guy has to say. Well, now I've been on a plane, and actually a Protestant friend of mine turned me onto this, that he's been listening to Madden on the early church and saying, I'm learning so much about Catholicism. And he's got these lectures on the early church that are available through the Kansas City Public Library. I think they're many public libraries on the app Libby,
Yeah.
Libby, and it's a great way to do audiobooks and everything else. So if you're in a place where maybe you can't take a book with you and you want to just listen to something while, if you're on a plane a lot or if you're driving a lot, this can be a great way of having that be something that actually builds up the soul rather than tearing it down. But it takes a lot more intentionality than just going on social media or doing any of these things that are likely to just feed the outrage addiction and likely to, even if they're not out and out sinful, they're at least unproductive and they're not making you a better person. So a good question for myself and maybe for anyone listening, at the end of, I don't know, an hour, at the end of a session of being online, whatever that looks like for you, stop and ask 2 things. One, what did I learn? Try to remember what you saw on Facebook 10 minutes ago. And if you can't, if it's that ephemeral, what are you doing? And 2, is this making me a better person in some way? Don't give me this nonsense about I'm better informed. No, you're not. You have more trivia, but is it actually making you more of a saint? Or are you just like a corrupt sinner with more knowledge of world events? Because that's not better informed, because you're not being formed well.
As we wrap up, what are you working on lately and what's Catholic Answers up to?
Yeah, so we are trying to share the truth of Jesus Christ and the truth of his church and answering
Thank you.
all of the objections people might have. So I had this season of, debating Jacob Hansen and doing a lot of stuff with Mormonism. I don't really know. I've been doing a lot of stuff lately that's kind of liturgically tied, but I'm going to be pivoting, but I'm not sure exactly what to yet. Unfortunately, everything like books is on hold. I have so much time I spend just making every week's kind of episodes of the podcast that I'm not doing any books right now. There's a couple books I really want to do. And there's one in particular that I don't think anyone besides me will read, but I really want to do it at some point, on just how to grow in wisdom like St. Thomas Aquinas. Because in the Puer Jesus, the homily he gives on the boy Jesus, he gives these 4 steps to how to become truly wise. And he's modeling off of Christ in the temple. And there's something so beautiful and brilliant to this that I'd love to just do like a book length exploration of like the tips that he gives and how to put them in practice.
Beautiful. And then anything else going on with Catholic Answers, or can we not talk about that?
The only thing I think I know what you're referring to. I don't know if that's publicly.
Yeah, good. No, we won't do it.
So I don't want to be that guy just in case.
Yeah, well, I'm really grateful for Catholic Answers. People can check them out, Catholic.com, and where can they find you?
Shameless Popery is my YouTube channel, and I usually have a short episode every Tuesday and a long episode every Thursday.
Thanks for the work that you're doing. We'll put a link in the description.
Thanks, I
Joe,
really appreciate that.
Fantastic to talk to you.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Thank you very much. I cannot believe you made it all the way to the end of this interview. The fact that you did shows me that you might enjoy a lot of the stuff that we do here at Pints with Aquinas. So please click subscribe, click the bell button. We really appreciate it.
Great darkness is falling upon this land. These brothers are our only hope to stand against it.
Not our only hope.
We need you, Merlin.
Merlin was a myth before our father was even born.
Merlin slew 70 men with his own hands.
No man is capable of such a thing.
The mortal man.
The Pendragon Cycle. Rise of the Merlin. Now streaming. Only on Daily Wire Plus.